Well, thank you.
Bawaskar ji, with your permission, shall I start the initial proceedings?
Yes, why not? I'm ready.
Manohar, over to you, Manohar. Manohar. Yeah, he is setting it for the live, this one. Yeah. Manohar, over to you.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, everyone. Wishing a warm good morning to one and all. I welcome everyone for this webinar on Frontiers in Medicine and the Nobel Legacy 2022, Innovators Behind Innovation from Text to Contest. Presented by NGSM Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences, Student Innovation Club, IIC, Nitte deemed to be University. I welcome all the eminent speakers, dignitaries, and eminent professors of Nitte deemed to be University, and I request our beloved principal, Professor Shri, to introduce, to have a welcome address. Over to you, sir.
Your microphone is muted, sir.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you, Manohar. Esteemed chief guest of today's webinar, Dr. Satish Kumar Bhandariji, Vice Chancellor of Nitte deemed to be University, and guest of honor, Padma Shri, Dr. Himmatrao Bawaskar ji, Dr. Harsha Halahalli, Registrar Nitte deemed to be University, and Dr. Praveen Shetty, the Research Director of Nitte deemed to be University, my colleagues, students, and other delegates from various institutions. I deem it is a great privilege to welcome you all to this webinar on Frontiers in Medicine and Nobel Legacy 2022, organized by NGSM Institute of Pharmaceutical Science. In short, NGSM IPS, which is a constituent college of Nitte deemed to be University, and it is ranked 45th in all India. We are in the top 50 pharma schools among 3,000 schools all over the country, and our program is accredited by National Board of Accreditation. As I said earlier, it's a constituent college of Nitte deemed to be University, which is one of the top universities in the country. We have been successively for last 5 years in the top 100 universities in India. Currently, we are ranked 77th and accredited A+ by NAC. I'm very proud to say that the constituent colleges, KSHEMA Medical Academy, A.B. Shetty Institute of Dental Science, NGSM Institute of Pharmaceutical Science, all these institutions are in the top 50 bracket in NIRF in India. And also the university has got great institutions like NMIT Institute of Technology, and also a school for nursing, a school for physiotherapy, a college for architecture, a college for mass communication and journalism, and so on and so forth. In fact, under the aegis of Nitte Education Trust, we have got more than 40 institutions, sir. And the university stands by its vision to build a humane society through excellence in education and healthcare. Of course, with a high degree of credibility, integrity, ethical standards, and social concern. This is what we stand for. I'm sure down the line, when our Honorable Vice Chancellor is going to speak, he'll be talking about the yeoman service that we are doing for the community at large. In fact, all this exercise started way back in October 2021, when my colleague, Professor Unnikrishnan, suggested that the students may be asked to predict the Nobel Prize in Medicine. In fact, it sounds, the exercise which sounds very simple, but it's extremely complex, because even the hardcore scientific community also cannot predict who is going to have this Nobel Prize for the year. There were many suggestions, of course, though all of them are much off the target. But in the process, I'm sure the students gathered great amount of knowledge, which was the main objective of calling for these suggestions, who will be getting the Nobel Prize in medicine this year. The students have to work hard and find out. And as a sequel to this, a seminar on Nobel legacy was contemplated. We were extremely delighted when Padma Shri Dr. Himmatrao Bawaskar agreed to share his views on innovators behind innovations. Working from his humble PhD, Dr. Bawaskar showed the world that it is not the gadgets or the instruments that are important, but an inquisitive mind, passion and compassion to carry out grassroots research. Sir, it is an honor for Nitte Dept University and to NGSM IPS to listen to your awe-inspiring journey and your views on research. On behalf of Nitte Dept University and NGSM IPS, I extend a very warm welcome to you, sir. And of course, we have the esteemed presence of our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Satish Kumar Bandari, an otolaryngologist by profession. Dr. Bandari is a keen researcher and academician. As the Dean of KSHEMA Medical Academy in his earlier tenure, he was instrumental in making the institute as one of the premier medical colleges in the country. Currently, he is the Vice Chancellor, and during his tenure, the university has got A+ ranking in NAC, and also it has been consistently, as I said earlier, in the top 100 universities in the country. Sir, I welcome you for this webinar and also thank you for making it despite your doctor's advice to take some rest. That is the testimony of your commitment and passion for education and research. Thank you very much for accepting it, and we wholeheartedly welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
And also I see the presence of our dynamic registrar of the Nitte Dept University, Dr. Harsha Halahalli. For me and for most of us, most of his students and medical students, he is the professor of eminence, because I know I would like to go on record telling that my daughter was his student and still she remembers how great a teacher Harsha is. I'm not just telling because I want to praise him. That is, he's a teacher of par excellence and researcher, because he was one of the co-guide for one of my PhD students. I know how meticulous he is in research activity as well. And apart from that, he has got a great scientific commitment, and he played, in fact, a very major role in taking the university ranking to a higher level with his critical analysis and documentation of the proceedings of the universities and the constituent colleges. Welcome, Dr. Harsha. You have made my day.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
And I also welcome Dr. Praveen Kumar Shetty, our dynamic director of University for Research. And he has been instrumental in really taking, transforming. Of course, research is a long-standing exercise, and he's putting his soul and mind. He's very passionate researcher. He is doing that. I see his presence here. Thank you very much, Praveen. Yes, I can see he has switched on his camera. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Praveen, though I was a little bit late in informing you about the things.
No.
My apologies for that, but I'm so glad that you could make it out to this thing. It's of course your own program. And also I welcome all my professional colleagues and many delegates. Right now I see more than 100 people who are listening to, eagerly trying to listen, waiting to listen to two of the excellent researchers, that is Dr. Padma Shri Himmatrao Bawaskar, and of course our own Harsha Halahalli, which I am sure that will be very exciting, informative, as well as I'm sure it is going to be thought-provoking, because we are all looking for to Bawaskar to say his travels and difficulties, what he has encountered. Unni Krishnan was telling me that had Dr. Bawaskar had all these gadgets and advanced instruments, what would have been his research? I do not want to comment. Maybe I do not know, because we all have got access to advanced gadgets. But I think the achievement what Bawaskar has made himself in the scientific community and in the area of science is enormous, with his ramshackle PhD and a small equipment to this thing. It all goes by the passion for research and to serve the community with the passion and compassion. With this brief introduction, I have given the perspective why and how we started, and I'm so glad that all of you could make out. I once again welcome all the delegates, all the participants to here, and I'm sure that the coming 2 hours will be really, really informative. I request all of you to stay tuned and take some message home at the end of this webinar. Thank you very much. Over to you, Manohar. That's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for welcoming everyone. Now, I would request Professor Satish Kumar Bandari, Vice Chancellor, Nitte Dept University, to address the gathering.
Very good morning, very distinguished guests and the delegates for this very exciting program from the university. First of all, I should welcome very distinguished physician scientist, Padma Shri Dr. Himmatrao Bawaskar. Welcome, Bawaskar ji, for this innovative program
Thank you.
organized by our very important constant college of the university, NGSM IPS, our pharmacy school. Professor Shri, the principal of the pharmacy school, Professor M.K. Unnikrishnan, the convener and organizing committee of this particular program. And it's Unnikrishnan's brainchild. I congratulate Unnikrishnan for bringing this very unique program to the campus. And my own colleague and distinguished registrar of the university, Professor Harsha Halahalli, and director of the research, Dr. Praveen Kumar Shetty, and the faculty of our pharmacy school and all the constant colleges of the university, and my dear students and the delegates who are participating in this program. It's a very, very important day for a university, according to me, for two reasons. One, very innovative program has been organized by our pharmacy school. Even though it's limited to pharmacy school, and actually it spreads to all the constant colleges of the university. It's a multidisciplinary college, and as Shri said, we have got more than 10 constant colleges in this campus. And I'm very glad to tell you that recently we added our engineering school and degree colleges and management school also under the fold of Nitte University. Now there are more than 11,000 students under the university. So it's going to be a very multidisciplinary program. And again, I should congratulate Shri for that innovative program and Unnikrishnan for the introduction of this particular program to the university. The second very important reason, according to him, is the presence of Padma Shri Dr. Himmatrao Bawaskar. Unni was talking to me and he said the background of Dr. Himmatrao Bawaskar, a physician turned scientist, very rare combination. I think always we physicians say shy away from research. From 1940s, Dr. Himmatrao Bawaskar, 40s and 50s, he introduced himself to research, and I understand he researched particularly on particularly the scorpion bite, which is very prevalent in the rural India, and used to kill a lot of hundreds of people annually. And I understand because of the very innovative treatment which was introduced by Bawaskar, the scorpion bite death was reduced from 40% to 1%. That too, as Shri said, without any sophisticated lab. Now, always when I talk to my colleagues from the university, they say, we don't have that facility, sir, this facility, we don't have time. But Himmatrao Bawaskar during 50s or 60s, he did wonderful work with these very primitive labs, and he could publish this in a very reputed journal. I understand. And even the BNJ editor of the journal came to his clinic and felicitated him. It's a wonderful achievement. I think he's really a role model to all of us. For these two reasons, I think this particular day is very important for us. I can call it another important, I can call it a red day in the history of Nitte University. When you talk about research, I think what is required is, as Shri said, what is required is a motivation. It is not the equipment or not the great facility which you provide. If you take the example of the one and only Asian and the Indian who got the Nobel Prize is C.V. Raman. When you go to the history of C.V. Raman, I understand when he was traveling from Europe to India, he saw the blueness of the sky and he thought why the sky is blue. And all of us thought that it's a reflection of the sea. But he thought differently, and he invented scattering of the light. His scattering light, I understand recently when I went to the repercussions of his research in 1930, now it is being extensively used in medicine. So always there's a translation research. So what we really get out of these Nobel laureates and the introduction of this Nobel legacy and talking about them, and program like Shastri to predict the Nobel laureates. I think again it's a very innovative idea by the pharmacy school and Shastri and Unnikrishnan, because these are the things should be, according to me, it should be the theme of various discussions which we are having in the campus. By involvement of not only pharmacy school, involvement by medical school, dental, our biomedical science research colleagues, all of us should join and they should discuss. And this wonderful program, I think, is really path-breaking or groundbreaking program. And this type of program should be conducted not once in a while annually. It should be conducted regularly. And I congratulate Shastri and our Unnikrishnan bringing this program. I think we can involve more and more faculty and students and inspire the people to get by, and bringing people like Himmatrao, Padma Shri Himmatrao Bawaskar. If he had come to the campus physically, I would have been very happy. Unfortunately, I know the reasons for his not coming physically to this campus due to COVID or other reasons. I think I once again, I request him to come to this campus whenever he finds time and talk to our faculty and students, inspire my colleagues to get involved in research. I'm very happy to tell you that under the leadership of various my senior colleagues, we have started state-of-the-art research facilities in the campus. Now we have got 7 team-based campus, starting from cytogenetics, molecular genetics, to animal house, various facilities in the campus. And in the pharmacy school, we have got nanotechnology and a lot of instrumentation. More than 20-30 crores of investment has been done in research facilities. And what is required, optimum utilization, bringing new ideas and getting inspired by my by various legendaries like Bawaskar. I hope this program will really inspire my colleagues, my faculty and students, and we'll have a very, very fruitful day. Thank you, Bawaskar ji, for participating in this program. And I wish great success for this program. And once again, I invite you to come and participate in one of the programs in the campus. Thank you very much. Wish you all the best.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your address. Now it's time to know more about our keynote speaker, Padma Shri, Dr. Himmatrao Bawaskar, sir, by an eminent professor, M.K. Unnikrishnan. It's over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. I shall forever cherish this opportunity of having to introduce Dr. Bawaskar, Padma Shri. I don't want to read out what's already in the Wikipedia and the public domain. It would be impossible to introduce Dr. Bawaskar without going to his intimate personal life full of hardship and toil. I wish I could read out his autobiography. I have asked him to give us a few more copies. I could not get them. I wish we have more. I have asked for the library to acquire them. Everybody must read this. He's a larger-than-life figure with an incredible line of publication in the most celebrated medical journals of this world, and that's only a small part of it. He is much more than a medical scientist and a pioneer in frugal innovation. I would rather dwell on some very eccentric, touching incidents in his life. The mark of a Mahatma, I would call it, the circumstances under which he worked, and that's what truly surprises anyone. Born in a poor peasant family, he had to leave home to get his education. He had to live in a temple, sleep on a gunny bag, wash and clean the premises, fetch water, run a bookshop, wash himself in the open. Later, he had to wash buffaloes to stay as a tenant in a friend's home. And during MBBS, he suffered from a bout of depression. He had to undergo ECT. He lost his memory. He struggled to complete his degree, of course, which he did with flying colors. And his efforts in unraveling the mystery of the scorpion sting, and finally his publication in Lancet, it came with great effort. And remember, in 1991, even WHO did not know that scorpion stings could kill people. That was the level of ignorance. The medical curriculum had completely neglected what Dr. Bawaskar has given life to. He refused promotion once to a much better place just to continue his research. You must read his autobiography to understand. He could not even attend his father's funeral because he was treating somebody with a scorpion sting, who had suffered from a scorpion sting. He was saving a life. His paper on scorpion sting was rejected by an Indian journal and was published in Lancet. And this, mark my words, it is before his MD that he got his paper in Lancet. I don't think there's anybody in this country who has achieved this kind of success. This is what makes him so rare. And without affiliation to a reputed institution, without membership to elite academies of sciences, without research funds, without a platoon of research assistants, without sophisticated labs, without expensive state-of-the-art equipment, without journals, without even a library and textbooks, what Bawaskar has achieved is something for all of us to learn. He had to subscribe to his own journals. If you zoom in on Prabhat Colony at the Mahad on the Google map, you will see Bawaskar's hospital about 100 meters from the Savitri River. This hospital is the capital of frugal innovation in India. And I hope you all pay a visit to this place. It is a pilgrimage center for all doctors, I believe, and researchers. With this, I would like to leave this interview. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for introducing our speaker. Now, with the folded hands, we welcome our keynote speaker to address the gathering. Sir, it's over to you.
Share करो. शेयर करना बोलो, स्क्रीन शेयर करो.
आपने किया होगा.
हाँ
आपने किया होगा.
नहीं स्क्रीन स्क्रीन शेयर स्क्रीन बोलो बोलो यस स्क्रीन स्क्रीन उनको बोला वीडियो सेटिंग. हाँ स्क्रीन शेयर करना पड़ेगा ना. हाँ यस ओके. ऐसा होगा. हाँ स्लाइड लिया नहीं इधर नीचे. हाँ रिस्टोर उनको बोलेगा स्क्रीन शेयर. बोलना शुरू करोगे.
हाँ
वो जल्दी करो. ऐसा कैसा होगा रे? उनको बोलोगे स्क्रीन शेयर करना. हाँ अरे ऐसे क्या हो रहा है? हेलो कैन आई शेयर द स्क्रीन प्लीज? हेलो हेलो.
Manohar.
हाँ
No, Manohar,
Yes, sir.
you just advise them how to share the
Yes,
screen.
sir. Though it is being allowed.
Yes.
So what I request is to open a PowerPoint, put it in the slideshow mode, and then
Yes.
go for a screen share, sir.
now you are
Open
looking
your-
my slides.
Yes, sir. You open your slides first, then
Yes,
go for
open.
screen sharing.
Go for. You are looking my slides.
No, sir.
Slides now. Huh?
No.
You tell how to do it, Manohar. Wait, tell them how to do it. Okay.
Where is the option to share?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
there
We
is-
have. Yes, sir, it's permitted to share the screen. So you can open your PowerPoint and then come back to the Zoom meetings and click the screen share option, the green icon.
Green icon, yes. Here. Okay. Share the
With
screen.
the arrow, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Okay, you are looking, you are seeing my
Yeah.
slides?
Yeah,
Huh?
yeah. We are
Oh,
seeing,
thank you,
sir.
sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Firstly. So, I'm really grateful of Vice Chancellors and Unikrishna, who was after me for many days, many
Sir,
months, I think.
Excuse
And
me,
his last,
Bawaskar, sir, sorry to interrupt. Can it be on the slideshow mode, sir?
Manoj,
It would be easy.
let it be as
Okay.
it is here. Let it be as it is. It will create complications. Let it be as it is.
Okay, sir.
okay. Are you listening?
Yeah,
Are you
sir.
able to listen to me?
Sir, you can go to the first slide, sir.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
come
Now,
there.
okay.
It is on second slide now.
No, this is the first slide. So I'm really grateful to you all people, and most important is the last sentence of Unikrishna sir made tears in my eyes, because this ultimately become pilgrimage of Scorpions thing. So now let us start. How did I work in my life? Now see, this not only Scorpions thing, many subjects I have studied. No doubt scorpion mortality, snake bite, very important, crate bite, which is most terrorist snake. HIV dystrophy we are looking at now. Fluorosis were treated in many villages. Cadmium in chronic renal failure, which were detected in the soil, blood, and the water, and ultimately government has to use surface water. Thyroid, one of the victim of iodine salt, which are proved. Now dementia, we say that RBC cholesterol is very important to know that if the low RBC cholesterol, you have to be a Nementine. If the higher RBC cholesterol, you have to get your RBC cholesterol inhibitor. Now many cases of COVID treated without remdesivir, zolpidem, this tozolam. And we use very rare usual drugs, metformin, colchicine, statin, and doxycycline, and heparin. In my area, we found B12 deficiency very common. B12 is not available in vegetable and non-vegetable also. So ultimately, very high homocysteine, hygiene, stroke of rural area. We say vitamin D resistant, the farmers, though they are exposed to the sun. Lead toxin, the battery worker is very common in my, because being having this MIDC. Ear crease of the premature diagnosis of the ischemic heart disease in young people. Early thermometric, we are the hospital to time, that is hospital near time in my hospital is 18 minutes. All over the world is 30 minutes. Gym tonic, we have seen the Chinese restaurant syndrome, which come with the important diagnostic of which, because patient minds after 2 hours of eating Chinese food. Now spinocytis, one village is completely suffer of spinocytis. Now genetic study is going on. Now let us see, which is common problem in my area is a snake bite. Is a Russell viper bleeding, crate cause neuroparalysis, and pulmonary demand death by scorpion sting. Now in the hospital, one day, one patient is recovering from pulmonary edema, other patient is neuroparalysis from the crate bite. There was extensively extreme flourishing of the scorpion snake in the co-contract. Now, what we did for 1976, when joined the primary health center of Birwadi, that published the first annotation in the Indian Heart Journal 1977, looking at the serious problem of scorpion sting. Since then, we are working day in and out, and mortality was reduced. We published more than 108 PubMed publications last 46 years. And last year, we published by the corona, this given the mass which was covered illustration of the Lancet, that a travel mass by the widely. Now, this is why. Now, most important, what are this? Do you see? When I joined the primary health center, a 16-year-old son of my comforter was died of scorpion sting. So ultimately, nobody has taught me to death due to scorpion sting. Even I contacted the universities and professor of medical, they say we are not about the death due to scorpion sting. Even WHO was not aware of scorpion sting. When I studied that clinical autopsy, ultimately I called the pharmacist and tell me what happened to the patient. He said in the midnight, my son has woke up. He was 16 years old. He had stung by scorpion. He had suddenly vomited and since sweated profusely all over the body for coming to 5 to 6 hours. He became cold. His BP was raised. Doctor has tried Lancet, Lanoxin, Amanopil, oxygen, and patient pulmonary gone in pulmonary edema, exploding growth, and he died. So ultimately, this was the pulmonary edema, and pulmonary edema not responding to the routine conjectural line of treatment. So this is a refractory pulmonary edema. And ultimately 1970-21, we are working very hard because PSC Birwadi, I was very young PSC Birwadi, we noticed various carpentering manifestations. Remember, during in 1970, there was no typewriters available here. So ultimately, I advise to my wife, though she is a doctor, please learn typewriting. She joined the classes with the 10th standard students and learned the typewriting to type our papers to publish in international journals. So ultimately, PSC mortality was restricted resources. Nothing. You see, now my laboratory was BP person server. This is pilgrimage of the clinical research, which the Unikrishna told just now. And this is a very 3-bedded hospital in my hospital without staff. Still, the research is going on. But Birwadi was the main where I work very hard. Birwadi is really my pilgrimage of the scorpions thing, which we say either in my lifetime. Now, piece of order which are discussed in literature. Now, search of a research. What search of research? Doctor is student till date, or shall I say, wage is to student, he dies. Yes, today I read the Lancet because Lancet come out every Friday. Yesterday I knew the New England Journal of Medicine and British Medical Journal. Very advances going on. Beta blocker was contraindicated in congestive cardiac. It is a drug of choice today in congestive cardiac. Thrombolysis, coronary artery, statin, diabetic hypertension, antiviral aspirin, and aspirin remains a drug of choice of this century. And this is advances going on in medicine. Unless and you read the medical journal, you not cope, you not face with the advanced knowledge. Now this is what happens. No internet was available 1966. No, the typewriter, mechanical typewriter only. Projector was 35 mm slide projector to train the doctor, and the laboratory was BP apparatus stethoscope. Now, very important, I trained the doctor in cattle say because it was when the mortality has reduced with the prazosin, I decided to train the peripheral doctors in taluka places, and maximum doctors are training in a cattle shed. We must have passion. This is very important. This another leader is another leader is addressing the election gathering in torrential rain. So he are not stop his talking in the torrential rain. And this is too much passion. You got this passion in the management, his passion in the medicine, passion in research, passion in the duty towards the patient. Nothing will be left and no stone will be left unturned to have a research. Now this is important. You see, clinical exam accuracy of sign is very important. You take the accuracy sign, diagnosis, go to the laboratory, read the disease, and then see that what is lacking, which sign I have left. So important is first see the patient, then read the book, again come to the ward to see what signs are which I missed. And that is the way to the message. Because dedication, devotion, sensitivity, and localizing sign, revise. You should revise time to time your diagnosis. One can revise that diagnosis because once you do the clinical medicine always stop, irrespective of whatever ultra-modern investigations are available today. Because, many things are not diagnosed by the TI, transient systemic patient, CT scan is normal. Can you diagnose TI? It is only by taking X-ray. Now, what we get scorpions is mild tachycardia. This is very big patient. In the primary, giant the primary, daily one is to face one pulmonary edema or dead body. I am tired of to do a postmortem. I have gone mad to see the many cases are young people, fathers, mothers, children are dying. One day what happened? In the midnight, a mother with a child of 6-month-old child, nursing mother come with a scorpion thing. In the morning, she developed massive pulmonary edema. Her child was crying. She applied the child to the breast and died of massive pulmonary edema. My heart was broken. And I took both that day that I will have to continue my research and I will find the solution. 10 years I was working day and day out to see ultimately the investigation and search out the prazosin. Most important thing in the victim, the expectorate says bricky red color. This oxygenated blood is expectorated with purple edema. Oxygen blood. What does it mean? It is the oxygenated blood is coming from left atrium may reach in oxygen blood, go to the left ventricle. Left ventricle because they increase left ventricle impedance. This impedance will increase because of excessive catamalam liberated by scorpion, and the pressure is transferred to the lungs capillaries. Ultimately, pulmonary vein is carrying a pure blood to the left atrium rupture because of raised pressure, and patient with the red color oxygenated blood.
Sir, you can click on the third slide on the left column.
Which one? No, this is because this is a very good video. This is a video. No. Okay. So in scorpions, you get the extreme sweating all over the body. I call it skin diarrhea. Sweat literally flows all over the body. And that's why the peripheral doctor think it is cold extremity sweating. Nobody took care of to take the BP of this victim and treated with atropine, adrenaline, because they themselves say it is shock and hypotension. I was the first to examine patient in detail. I noticed some patients sink, vomiting, sweating, cold BP was 200, 110, bradycardia, then subsequently not treated, hypotension, tachycardia, and pulmonary edema, and refractory heart failure. Pupils were dilated because of dilatations and the people, because this iris is reaching the acetylcholine receptor. Now the acetylcholine receptor stimulation causes dilatation of pupils. So dilatation is one of the sign of alpha-1 receptor stimulation. Now all the season, 2 hot season, April to June, and September, October, we will get many cases called February. In October month, we get many cases of pulmonary edema. All over the India, the cases are reported now. Now, in 1961, the PM Mundle from my area reported 23 deaths out of 78 cases, that is 30% mortality. When I joined the primary health center, 5 out of 17 cases died. Similar mortality was reported. So 1961 to 70, medical science was silent. Irrespective of giving decongestive treatment, everything patient pulmonary to clear, but tachycardia persists. Again, repeated patient lapse in pulmonary edema, and ultimately cardiogenic shock, hypotension, younger, cardiac arrhythmia, convulsion, and die. So various ECG. So now that this is the ECG of around 1978. This ECG, no, now you will not look at this ECG. This all ECG are going to the museum because of utility of recent advanced treatment, prazosin. Mark QTC prolongation. You see, QT mark, QT for more than 1 minute. Ventricular alternance, which I say, complete cardiac arrest for complete heart block, Brugada syndrome, and mild wide QRS complex. So whole myocardium edematous. Rhythm goes to very slowly. We get the edematous wide QRS complex. Now this time, you see, when I become post-graduation from this medical, I took chance that not a single day I was stayed in the Pune and get transferred to the Porapur, where the scorpion cases are very high. And number 2, when I joined with the because we see during the BZ Medical College, I discussed in seminar, no professor, no researcher, no scientist could able to advise me. Yes, you can search out your own solution. Ultimately, I read in detail. And ultimately, that time the hard topic was refractory heart failure. And this refractory heart failure was treated with sodium nitrophosphoide. And when I presented my cases in the Galaxy and seminar of the professor and tutorial, I was presented refractory periodic syndrome, but nobody could able to advise and confirm this a refractory heart failure. So I and my decided to use sodium nitrophosphoide. So no sooner I stayed there, I took out the few ampoules of sodium nitrophosphoide, again gone to primary health center, Kolhapur, where scorpion cases was more. Now that time, because of knowledge, because of resistance, I used pharmacological tourniquet. We applied tourniquet, rotating tourniquet. Few patients survived of rotating tourniquet. So this is a reduce of the preload, which will save this victim. So ultimately, few patients survived of rotating tourniquet. Then prazosin come in 1986, and many cases as with the prazosin, mortal was reduced. So ultimately, see, rotating tourniquet was advised by Unibrunnwald in 1952. He has said, when you use the mercury diuretic for congestive heart failure resistant to the diuretic, he said rotating tourniquet may help, and he has advised 1957, 62, but rotating tourniquet is the drug of choice 1952. So ultimately, I use the rotating tourniquet, and many patients survive. Now, see, in 1976, I was a young medical officer.
Bawaskar ji, आप स्लाइड मूव कर रहे हैं और मतलब इधर ऑडियंस को स्लाइड मूव नहीं हो रहा है. आप राइट साइड में क्लिक कर दीजिए, वो स्लाइड 3-4 जो भी आप दिखाना चाहते हैं उसको क्लिक कर दीजिए, हम देख सकते हैं. नहीं तो अभी आपका फर्स्ट स्लाइड ही दिखाई दे रहा है हमें.
अरे वो तो स्लाइड तो होगा अभी.
हाँ होगा, राइट साइड में आपका स्लाइड्स है ना, उसमें क्लिक कर दीजिए, वो आ जाएगा.
Right many? Hey,
I mean, there must be some, Manohar, you can help him to move the slides, no? I mean, you can tell how it is to be done. Manohar?
Yes, sir.
I'm sure that he has moved forward, but we are all seeing only the first slide, no? There are some
Yes, sir.
pictures of in the second, third slide. How he has to take it forward, he can do it.
Sir, you can click on the small tiles on the left
Hello,
screen,
jaldi, jaldi,
whichever
jaldi.
slides you want.
huh? What's that?
No, वो
Left
slide
side.
I'm looking slide. You said you are
नहीं
looking on the slide.
आपका इसमें स्क्रॉल हो रहा है लेकिन ऑडियंस से इसमें नहीं हो रहा है फर्स्ट स्लाइड में ही है
किधर क्लिक करना है?
वो स्लाइड में छोटा छोटा दिखाई दे रहा है ना स्लाइड छोटा छोटा जो आपका स्लाइड्स है उसमें नहीं दिखाई दे रहा है
नहीं नहीं मेरे को फुल स्क्रीन दिख रहा है.
वो फुल स्क्रीन आपको फुल स्क्रीन बनाए आपका if somebody can Manohar how it is to be done he has to make it a small screen
I think the wrong screen is being shared. The full screen, the screen shows screen is not being shared. His PPT background is being shared. You have to advise him to change.
शेयर उनको
Yeah.
दिख रहा नहीं स्लाइड. बोल दे राइट में.
yeah I do not know how it is to be done
Tabs, I think. Yes, sir. Correct.
अब आ गया
अब ठीक है, sir.
Okay.
अब आ गया
So we'll not go behind now. Start from here only.
yeah Scorpion Sting 1976 to 2009 slide में हम आप उधर
Oh
से-
yes. Okay.
thank you
But
sir
at least you are listen me, no?
I can we can
That's
hear
more than enough.
we can hear that
So-
is fine
Well, you see, 1970 I was young. That time, no advice was to me. So I tried myself various atropine, steroid, digoxin, diuretic, chlorpromazine. But many patients survived of chlorpromazine. I used chlorpromazine to sedate the irritable patient. And chlorpromazine patient was improved because of alpha action of largate, chlorpromazine. Then we gradually improved propranolol. We should propranolol. Many patients died of refractory heart failure, resistant heart. So propranolol was out because the heart textbook of medicine, textbook of heart, that is a Harsh textbook mentioned in the Scorpion thing, catechol says you can use propranolol. I tried a patient used to die of myocardium. Ultimately, when I isosorbate nitric oxide sorbitrate to the victim for near about 20 minutes, 20 hours, sublingually 20 minutes, patient used to recover. 10% patient recover of pulmonary edema. And then after we added prazosin and nifedipine, digoxin, and diuretics. We know still of prazosin, nifedipine, patient developed pulmonary edema, but the mortality was reduced to 23%. When I use only prazosin and nifedipine, see the mortality because nifedipine has a negative effect on the myocardium. We use only prazosin or SNP, mortality is almost zero. Now this was published in the routine Krunegate. Now you see, now one day 8 years old boy has come to in the Scorpion thing and developed in the morning pulmonary edema, was a lone child of the parent. The father has accompanied the child. And then I have decided when I left the BC Medical College after post-graduation, come with the sodium nitroprusside ampoules, I have decided to apply sodium nitroprusside with the sound knowledge. Most important, the child has early in the morning developed, he has a priapism, vomiting, sweating, and child developed pulmonary edema in the morning. I took a permission of a father that can I apply because in this area there was a dictum, notion the priapism, sweating, or podium psychosis, child is going to die because it's taken as a fact of life. You see, you hear many times what happens when the child of priapism, sweating, and proximity, they used to call the relatives because they have to arrange a funeral of the next day. So in the living stage of human being, they were preparing for funeral. This was the condition in this area. So ultimately, the child of 8 years old, they all in the morning, and father has given him permission to apply sodium. Though his BP was 70, where sodium nitroprusside was conjugated, he was cold. The bilateral scrapes was accepted in the blood. Cough and refractory cough continuous, and patient could not sleep all night. I with the drip, there was no micro dip, no scalp pain, no intracath, no infusion pump, no cardiac monitor. At that time, we applied sodium nitroprusside to this victim. My patients were preparing the drops. I was just taking the BP every 5 minutes. I was just disturbed because BP was 70, heart rate was 180, and surprised, at the end of 4 hours, The crave disappear, extremity warm, expert discharge, child gone to sleep. I gone mad because this was the first case we served a refractory heart failure in 1 month. I treated more than 100 cases of sodium nitroxide. So ultimately, and same day my father died, as Unikrishna told. I did not attend the funeral, but because the father father of new research, who has donated his son to my research, I should give him promises. That is ethics and promise and guarantee. I will stay with his son because he has donated his son to my research. Ultimately, my problem is that this sodium nitroxide is not a solution at all. Now, sodium nitroxide could not be applied at primary health center. No medical office is able to manage with sodium nitroxide and not available so easily at the primary health center or taluka place. So I gone again to Bombay, Pune. But all the medical laboratories I studied in detail. In one New England Journal machine, they said when there was complete subject on the prazosin and the heart failure. The word he has mentioned, prazosin for oral sonography. So ultimately, this is a rebirth of prazosin. So I just say, import the prazosin, that was prazosin not available from Karachi. I started prazosin, morbidity, mortality was almost reduced because oral prazosin can be administered by the doctors at primary health center. Now, what is sodium nitroxide? Since the advent of S130 cases, but prazosin is very important. Now, prazosin, a post-alpha blocker, is like oral. We search out detail and prazosin imported. Read the alpha receptor stimulation plays important role in the pathogens of acute pulmonary disease report from Prama from Brazil, Trinidad, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Arizona. The similar cases of scorpion sting with autonomous storm is reported. Now, this is very important. In addition to prazosin, is a BiPAP is also very important. You can apply BiPAP to this victim. BiPAP to this victim because it will reduce the strain and it will reduce the strain and it will prevent the energy of muscle. And additional BiPAP is help with the patient is from edema. Now you see, this is a patient of today. I just got from a government hospital. The patient is I had a staying at 9 p.m. yesterday. He reported to the hospital, developed pulmonary edema. He was given prazosin. He was put on dobutamine. I sent there. I put on BiPAP. The saturation point 82, certainly just 92. So BiPAP is very important. His heart rate is now more than 167. Now heart rate is reducing. After this lecture, I will go to see this patient again. Now this again to remain massive pulmonary edema. See, heart rate of 167 within 2 hours of the AVC dopamine BiPAP is reduced to heart rate. Now this is various scorpions, various ECG changes we see. Now this ECG changes which occur because of the pulmonary edema, then marked tachycardia, tented TVS, ventricular fibrillation, and Brugada syndrome. These ECG changes are which occur in the scorpion sting. Now even the black scorpion, which can cause a marked left bundle branch block, marked bradycardia and left bundle branch block. Now we have seen 2 districts. In my area, co-contract with just the khaki color or red color scorpion, but the rest of the Maharashtra get black color scorpion. But even the black color scorpion can manifest like autonomous T10 telver, similar to scorpion. So it is not a species, it is a venom, which is sodium channel active vessel result in pulmonary edema. Now here, echocardiography shows various changes. So myocardium is stunned. These are the recent changes we are getting. Stunned myocardium doesn't contract at all because there is extra load, calcium loaded in the cell. So stunning of myocardium doesn't contract at all. Stinging of septum, which is very common in the scorpion sting. Now you say, look at massive pulmonary edema patient with the stunning, the echocardiogram, so the stunning of the myocardium, thinning of septum after contraction, patient improves. Now these children, marked tachycardia in the children. See, blind children is very important, marked tachycardia, and difficult to treat the children because irritable because of hypertensive classes, hyperencephalopathy, which also, now we cannot take the proper BP. So just cry, just irritability, and just looking at ocular classes, which is a diagnostic of scorpion sting. Now look at the mother's face. You see, this mother is a professor of pediatrics. Look at a mother face. Mother face is so much depressed and sorrowful. This indicates child is bad. And after improvement, look at the mother's face. It is a picture, mirror. Mother face is a mirror of the health of a child. Now, laboratory investigation, WBC is increased, cardiac enzyme is also increased. Now, mass different in Calcutta, they are reported pulmonary edema with a tachycardia. Now, various scorpion is found. This all various areas. Our India, we get this type of scorpion. It's a venomous scorpion. South Arabia, Brazil, Trinidad, pancreatitis, Tunisia, and India is the less venomous. See, black scorpion. How to difference between the venomous and non-venomous? In the venomous scorpion, the claws are cylinder, while the tail is stout. In the non-venomous, claws are thick and healthy, and more stout as broad as compared to tail. This is a diagnostic of the severe scorpion, venomous scorpion thing. Now the scorpion gives vivipar, gives to the birth to the young one, and then a young one nibbles to the mother still till she dies. Now this is scorpion which we recently found in the Gadchiroli forest. Now what we say, look at this patient get excessive swelling, excessive sweating, ocular crashes, severe priapism, dilatation of pupil. Now this ocular crashes is very important. Many times this is taken neuroparasite like a snake bite. It is not like that. So severe priapism is a diagnostic of scorpion thing, but not a prognostic value. But in the midnight, patient come because no soon sting occurs because of severe vasoconstriction. The pain conducting fibers get anoxia, and the pain conduction is no more there. So pain disappears. Local pain is no more. That's why the many newcomers say scorpion is no local. How it can be? Because of vasoconstriction, we get no local pain at all. If the child comes with no local pain, no crying at all, severe priapism, sweating, and cold extremity, diagnosis of scorpion is confirmed. Most important, no sooner the treatment started, no sooner we start the treatment, the vasodilation occurs, circulation improve, hypoxia improve, the pain conducting fiber lost their anoxia, get oxygenated, and reconduction of pain appear. So reappearance of the pain, which is absent initially, is a diagnostic of recovery. Now, severe priapism persists for near 24 hours. In one patient, it was near about 1 week. So severe priapism is a very diagnostic. Now look at very much sweating or salivation, ropey salivation. Patient unable to bring out the ropey thick mucosoid salivation, which again most diagnostic of scorpion because it is parasympathetic stimulation. The glands are stimulated, and we get a ropey salivation. Then pulmonary edema of the thick patches. Even we get an infarct, cerebral infarct. This water tear topic, cerebral infarct, which can get in scorpion sting is not properly in time. Cold extremity, just like Wasserman says, is a diagnostic. Now, this cold extremity is the most diagnostic of scorpion thing, is called severe vasoconstriction. And you watch for cold extremity, which have no pain at all. And the improvement of cold extremity, absence of pain, this gold clinical matter, clinical monitor, which with the relative can look on the bedside to keep the watch on patient improving not. Reappearance of pain, warming back extremity are the typical vital sign of recovery. You won't get a hemiplegia. Severe local pain. See, local pain without sweating, without cold extremity is a benign. The tourniquet should be avoided. Severe tourniquet because of they tightly many times develop gangrenes. Now these are so vomiting, sweating, salivation. This all my first paper published in the Lancet, that is 1982. Now what we get, the local pain is very important. Vomiting, sweating, priapism, salivation, cold extremity, pulmonary edema, hypertension, tachycardia, bradycardia, murmur, gallop, and fetal. This is a spectrum of 1%. If severe hypertension not treated properly, extra load is put left ventricle, left finger tries is maximum to pour the blood, ultimately blood accumulates left ventricle fails, hypotension occurs, tachycardia persists, and patient develop pulmonary edema and death. So this is a spectrum of 1%. Now, when we treated near about 400 patients, local pain was very less. Vomiting was 97%, sweating 97%, cold extremity almost all, priapism, hypertension 40%, pulmonary edema 41% developed pulmonary edema, tachycardia 16%, and fatality was very broad day in moribund condition. Yellow in children, 71% used to broad take that time because no treatment is available. PhD doctor or doctor give atropine, Lasix, steroids, and the patient deteriorate. Patient moves one hospital to another hospital, patient to die. So ultimately, extensive for bilateral, unilateral, just like ARTS phenomena we see in pulmonary edema. But when to transit ventricular tachycardia. Now this transit ventricular doesn't need any treatment. It's self-curing of, self-restaining of the transit ventricular tachycardia with the certain. Now, when you say, look at the patient has brick red blood. This is massive pulmonary edema, marked tachycardia, and which helpful with the BiPAP and massive elastic spray. Now, important thing in early stage, when the patient comes in OPD with a massive pulmonary edema, expectorating cyanosis, tachycardia, time is great emergency. In that stage, we spray the nitroglycerin spray in the mouth. Ultimately, preload is reduced and congestion is improved. By this time, we can start dobutamine, prazosin, or nitroprusside, or a BiPAP. So ultimately, what difference the snake hemoptysis and the bleeding occur in the scorpion? Scorpion it will get oxygen blood, while the snake bleeding we get a venomous blood. Now look at the blood difference between two. So what is sodium? What is scorpion venom? Delays the closing of neuronal sodium channel. It inhibits the potassium channel, resulting in sudden outbreak of endogenous catecholamine and is called autonomic storm. Transient parasthenia stimulation caused by vomiting, sweating, salivation, bradycardia, increased insulin secretion, while the prolonged sympathetic tachycardia, hypertension, pulmonary edema, reduction of the insulin secretion, hypertension, hyperglycemia. Alpha receptor stimulation plays important role in the pulmonary edema. Leukocytes, red cardiac urine VMP raise. Now this is which I published in New England Journal of Medicine. What is cholinergic excess, adrenalic excess, and neuromuscular excess, which is not found in the India. It's found in Arizona. Now this what we national to international we have published all over the articles. Now many ECG changes, tentative use, marked tachycardia, PQRAC alternance, infarction like pattern. These are various ECG changes. Heart rate was 300 of child who survived. Now where is infarction like pattern? Acute myocardial infarction like pattern, which is very important of this catcon. When the transient ventricular tachycardia, see in one patient we get ventricular tachycardia, ventricular fibrillation, sinus tachycardia, AV block, junction anemia, complete block, and patient recover. So in one patient, if we monitor, we get all types of arrhythmia. But it's the most, not a single patient died of cardiac arrest once he is given a process. So ultimately, in early stage, we get a tentative, just like Ashoka tree in ECG. If patient recovery occurs, it gives just like a Christmas tree, broad base with a blunted tip. Here, the not blunted tip. So this is acute phase, is a recovery phase. Now this 10 years old boy stung by the right atomic storm, pulmonary edema, heart rate of 150, 180, was given prazosin after 24 hours. You see, in the children properly, prazosin, no doubt patient improves, but after 24 hours, these children develop marked tachycardia, and that tachycardia, when controlled by the dobutamine, 10 microgram per kg per minute, heart rate will reduce, ejection fraction improves. Now, where is this again? Various types of ECG, wonderful. This I published in the JAMA. Typical tachycardia with this helmet sign typical seen in the marked tachycardia. Now this is another patient which come in the after 24 hours. Patient come in the giddiness, syncope. He got a ventricular tachycardia. She had a scorpacing 24 before, and she was not into the prazosin. She did vomiting, sweating, BP was raised, and patient got ventricular tachycardia, irrespective of giving a DC shock. Repeated DC of 60, 100, 200 Julius, no improvement. Tachycardia proceeds. So we apply magnesium sulfate because scorpions think of QT prolongation, just like a solid point and QT prolongation, which the drug of choice is magnesium sulfate, and magnesium result in formation of transient Brugada syndrome. This is typical of transient Brugada syndrome. And patient already infarction like that. This is infarction, but this is not infarction. If you language, there is small QRS complex, small is. RVO is there, very small RVO, this small RVO, and this followed up patient, there is no infarction at all. Patient has recovered completely. So what are the EC changes after? Tentative use, sinus bradycardia, VPC, transitive acute EMI like pattern, pulmonary edema, various blocks, peaky or curtain, prolonged QTC, T inversion, non-Q infarct, or transient Q induction defect. So now the tourniquet, whether tourniquet is helpful or not. In one patient, she come with a tourniquet, no vomiting, sweating, nothing. I was thinking is a notes on ECG was almost normal. Notes on tourniquet was released. Patient developed massive sweating, this ropey salivation, pulmonary edema. So this ultimately is a lot of controversy where tourniquet help or not. Again, this patient got the multiple tourniquets. Now his ECG changes. See, scorpion sting. 4 hours, you see, there was massive pulmonary edema. After 4 hours of prazosin, the pulmonary edema on the way to disappear. So how the prazosin is that? It is a post-synaptic, phosphodiesterase inhibitor. And this phosphodiesterase increases cyclic GMP. By cyclic GMP, it stimulates nitric oxide synthesis and after cause venodilation, pre and post, both arterial and venous dilatation. So the balance vasodilator. And because of increased GMP, it enhances insulin secretion, beta cell of pancreas, which is depressed in the scorpion, with glucose is raised. So hyperglycemia is prevented by prazosin. It reduces preload after load, irrational control of hypertension. It enhances it increases secretion inhibited by insulin. It prevents the release of potassium from the liver. So hyperkalemia is prevented. It is a balanced vascular. By this reduced preload left hand impedance without tachycardia, with those causing tachycardia, without causing increased additional energy, the myocardium is improved. And if you know here, very important, you see, potassium is raised. Now we'll see that. Now it should fast acting, not the sustained acting. 250 microgram or 30 microgram care 3 hours late till the extremities are cold. 500 microgram in adults. Child should not be allowed to lie bed or should not live in our routine in India. Stick because of to avoid a first dose phenomena. Stick bed rest is very important. An important thing in the government hospital or even war hospital, prazosin should be administered by the doctor himself. After admission of prazosin, after hour or 2 hours, he should choose whether it's absorbed, gone in circulation, look at the BP, look at activity, feel the patient automatically paresthesia, which occurs because first was disappear, patient feel better, he passed the hearing, tachycardia will reduce. This sign you have to do. Never hand over the drugs to the mother. Mother may fail to do because ultimately child has received some injection. This is that she doesn't give importance to the tablet. Let me say here, one day what happened, a 3-month-old child has come to my hospital. The problems were myself was very panicked. The child was not taking the prazosin, giving the mother's milk, giving the honey, as all attempts were failed. Ultimately, I said to the mother, unless this tablet or this powder goes in stomach of your child, then the child will survive. I was sitting by the side of child. The mother was disturbed. Mother make a face and apply his nipple and force the nipple to the child mouth and the child absorb the prazosin. And this is the route is not mentioned in the Nelson textbook of medicine, which is learned in rural area by sitting the bedside day in and day out. Now, how the prazosin is, cyclic GMP. Now, alpha blocker, preload after load is reduces. Then coronary vasodilatation, myocardial oxygen, open the sodium canal channel, nitric oxide, cyclic GMP is increased, and ultimately this is all clinical manifestation, which is the prazosin, which improve the pathophysiology, which happens to scorpion. So that's why we say prazosin is pathological, physiological antidote to scorpion venom action. This all action, if you look at this slide, the action of prazosin just to reduce the autonomic storm. Whatever happened in autonomic storm will be recovered by the prazosin. Now, insulin. Important is in this patient, we have seen the insulin was raised. This insulin was reduced and the glucose was raised. As you start after prazosin, insulin raising. Potassium is also raised. Hyperglycemia and potassium is also raised. VMA level is in urine also. So what does it mean? We got hyperkalemia, we got hyperglycemia, we got insulin. So ultimately, we are preparing natural GIK-D, which salvages the myocardium in the circulation itself. So this is the natural GIK-D, which is prepared by simple prazosin. So ultimately, we got a yes with the prazosin mark. Sometimes we need a dopamine when tachycardia persists. So dilatation of people I have discussed. And you want a black color scorpion. When it look like the venomous, this scorpion reported from Aurangabad district in Maharashtra with the tachycardia. The professor advised adrenaline, noradrenaline, dopamine. Patient was deteriorated fast. I received a phone call. I said, stop everything. Only go to dopamine. Patient improve. So it is the understanding of pathophysiology. Now, this again another medical college. Patient has massive pulmonary, same thing. Dopamine, noradrenaline, everything was considered applied. Patient deteriorated. I said out to stop everything. Only give dopamine. If the pulmonary bypass, patient will improve. So ultimately, mild tachycardia, which can occur in children. So sodium nitroprusside, when patient has a massive pulmonary edema, this is very important. No sooner apply sodium nitroprusside, patient improves. But now instead of sodium metal, one can give nitroglyceride drip also, which is easily available. Now this scorpion thing with hypertension, this patient has scorpion thing in between mild tachycardia. Rarely we never share any anaphylaxis due to antivenom. So again, one patient with a scorpion vomiting, sweating, developed infarction. And the infarct, he was atherosclerotic. So acetylcholine is liberated in atherosclerotic, acetylcholine liberated in atherosclerotic patient will cause severe vasoconstriction of coronary arteries because it's stimulant to the smooth muscle, not a dilated. When atherosclerotic coronary arteries are there, patient develop myocardial infarction, sustain ventricular tachycardia because severe hypoxia. We defibrillator him, then we give thrombolytic therapy, ESV, prazosin, patient recover. So ultimate indication of scorpion, antivenom, and prazosin. Victim with autonomic storm, vomiting, sweating, salivation, priapism, codex means hypotension, bradycardia, tachycardia, pulmonary edema, history of scorpion. Now this which published in the Lancet and Lancet in a various journal. Now important is the last, you see, my cup of the research is full. Notion of the recovery is completed, applied to the practical application has happened to the patient. My cup of the research is completely full. Now this is a British medical journal. We did a trial of random antivenom was available 2011. We did take a trial, prazosin plus antivenom versus prazosin alone, and we noted that recovery. We say parasympathetic stimulation indicate vomiting, sweating, salivation. That stage indicate venom is active, venom is circulating. When there is hypertension, tachycardia, venom have reached to the target organ, that venom can be neutralized. We have to use prazosin. So if the patient coming in the parasympathetic hyperactivity, antivenom is a drug of choice. Now it is I published paper in the BMJ. Now very important thing which I noticed, no doubt this paper is published, but now in 70 patients we use antivenom. In not a single patient develop anaphylaxis because of circulating antivenom is raised. On this conclusion criteria, we mentioned that adrenaline can be used as a prophylaxis before the antivenom if the doctor is worried or afraid of anaphylaxis. So ultimately recovery was very fast, and this was published in the BMJ with the cover illustration. This published in the BMJ with cover illustration. Now, ultimately, what are the scorpions things? Stage 1, sweating, vomiting, which come early stage, you can do yes with prazosin. Only yes, again, tachycardia with yes with prazosin. 6A with the dobutamine, pulmonary edema, prazosin, dobutamine, yes with non-invasive ventilator. If the massive pulmonary edema, we have to go in sodium nitroglyceride, nitroglyceride, and bypass. Hypotension and shock, not tachycardia 2 levels, dobutamine is a drug of choice. You see, when the patient have a warm tachycardia, at this stage, prazosin has no role at all because prazosin has a role to vasoconstriction. Codex-midi is the only indication of prazosin. So ultimately, my dear friend, these are Lancet, BMJ, New England Journal of Medicine. These are the leaders in medicine. And I am fortunate I become rich in academic currency. I published 23 letters, one paper, 3 case report in Lancet. There is RCT in the BMJ and review in the New England Journal of Medicine. So this is a Brazil scorpion called local necrosis. Now this ultimately mosquito net, simple mosquito net with a scorpion which will fall from the loose ties during the night out will prevent the scorpion mortality. Ultimately, the research. You see, corporate hospital, many gadgets available. They carve for the patient, but I never worried of the patient. I worried of my research. At the primary health source, we publish many papers. So our PhD is heavier than the corporate hospital or medical college. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah.
Now, moving on to our next session, I would welcome.
Manohar, will we be taking some questions now? No.
So,
Or will it be later? Maybe sir has to, if he's busy. What do you say? I don't know.
according to the time schedule, it will be better if we can take it at the end at once.
Is it okay with Bawaskar ji? That is the thing.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay, no problem. Okay. What next half an hour?
Bawaskar ji,
Sir, I think
अबे आधा घंटा होगी चाहते.
I think we should have the question answer session for a session now itself. I suggest that.
Okay.
what shall we do, Harsha? Right now, shall we?
So you can ask me question, please.
Have the
That
question
now.
answer session now
Okay.
itself, so that if
Yeah. I will ask one question, sir.
Huh?
Bawaskar ji, all scorpion bites are fatal, sir?
Huh? No, all scorpion bites are not fit. You see, even patient of venomous bite, maybe have severe local pain. It is amount of venom injectable autonomic instead of sodium channel activator. Important thing is when sodium channel is activated, when there is sweating, salivation, vomiting, and when there is hypertension with a minimal local pain, is a venomous bite. That scorpion may not be venomous zoologically, but for clinician, it's a venomous bite.
But the second thing is antivenom is available, no? I mean,
Yeah, it's available from Hopkins Institute, Mumbai.
Okay. Yeah, those are the two things. Like, kyunki in this part of our state also, there are many scorpions here and there roaming around in our farm. So
But dates are occurring in your area.
Ji?
Deaths are occurring, deaths.
Okay.
Yes, they are fatal in your area.
No, there is no death, but you see quite often scorpions moving here and there,
Okay.
Especially in the village side and all,
Okay.
in farmland and all. So मुझे थोड़ा डर लगा.
No, be eco-friendly, leave them alone.
Okay. That's right.
Correct. Okay.
Sir, this is Dr. Praveen. Hello.
Yes. tell me.
Bawaskar, sir. Yeah.
Yes.
So is this prazosone in higher dosage? Is this toxic, sir? Little higher dosage.
No, it is not toxic. You see, I have not seen a patient died of antihypertensive drug higher dose, because it's ultimately we give 250 microgram. It is not milligram. 1 milligram to 1000 microgram. With 250, 1/4 tablet 3 hourly, and 500 milligram 3 hourly. Maximum dosage require 5 to 6. Why these are patient become warm?
Oral dosage.
A microgram dose.
Oral dosage, right?
What's that?
Oral dosage.
Oral dose, no? मतलब मुंह से
Oral is oral. That was my aim, no? Sodium nitrate cannot be applied by the periphery. It's an oral dose. You see what happens? The action start at the 1 hour. Half lifetime is 3 hours. So that's how we have to repeat 3 hourly.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Hello.
So any more questions will be taking at the end. And moving on to the next session, I would welcome.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
So, as per the request and appeal of Vice Chancellor, I will definitely come to your institute, deliver talk. And the subject will be search of a research, not only scorpion, search of a research. I've got many other search. We'll discuss. At least you must give more than 90 minutes to talk. I will come there.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, Dr. Praveen Shetty will take it forward. We are so eager to receive you here in Mangalore, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Should I leave the meeting now, please?
Pardon me?
I can leave?
Yeah, of course. There is next talk by Dr. Harsha Halahalli. I mean, it is your time, sir. I mean, if you are engaged, otherwise you can go. Otherwise, it's fine. It's fine, sir. Yeah. And we look forward meeting you in Mangalore, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
Okay, sir. Shall we proceed with our next session, sir?
Yes, Manohar, proceed.
Okay. So we would invite our professor and registrar of Nitte University, Harsha sir, to take the proceedings forward with the invited talk, Nobel Prizes in Medicine 2021. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you, Manohar. I am still kind of spellbound by the previous talk. I think for all of us, it was a great honor to listen to Dr. Bawaskar. There is a word in Kannada, romanchana. It doesn't translate well into English, but the a sense of awe that one feels when you listen to somebody who is genuinely worked in an area to great depth and has practiced what he has discovered and made an impact on society. I think it was a great honor for all of us. We should invite Dr. Bawaskar again here and get him to speak to as many students as we can. It was a masterclass both in medicine and in physiology as well as pharmacology. It's very rare to find somebody who can translate their work experiences into such a amazing presentation. I wish to congratulate Dr. Shastri and Dr. Unikrishnan for coming up with this fantastic idea of raising awareness about Nobel Prizes amongst students and the competition for predicting the Nobel Prize winners. I think we should have this every year, and if we have it more often, I think students will actually explore current science more, and they will be more successful in identifying the leaders in the field. And actually, I'm sure that in a year or two, they will come up with the right predictions too. So congratulations, Principal Dr. Shastri and Dr. Unikrishnan. I'm grateful for being invited here to make a small presentation on the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for the year 2021. It gives me great pride as a physiologist to point out that the Nobel Prize in the area of medicine is actually Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. It has always been so, and I hope that it remains so, because physiology is indeed the bedrock of medicine. And when we heard Dr. Bawaskar speak about the physiology of scorpion bite and the physiology of the action of prazosin, there could be no better kind of exposition of the link between physiology and medicine. So I take pride in being a physiologist, and I'm delighted to be part of this program here today. Why should we look at Nobel Prize winners? Why should we explore Nobel Prizes in any field to a greater extent? I believe it gives us a great opportunity to learn more about this science, as well as get insights into life. Because at the end of the day, Nobel Prize winners are people like you and me, and they have often overcome great odds. They've overcome great challenges to achieve what they've done. And believe me, when you hear to them speaking, most of them don't think of it as a great achievement per se, but they look upon it as the friction of a love of their lives. So it's a very humbling experience to actually read about Nobel Prize winners and also listen to them. Thanks to the online advances in online video sharing, you actually get to hear most of these people speak, and I advise students here to actually listen to some of these videos about Nobel Prize winners speaking about their discoveries. Today we're looking at the 2021 winners in physiology or medicine. Two gentlemen, David Julius and Adam Pataputian, were honored with the Nobel Prize in 2021. Their work is very much related. David Julius and his group began their search for pain receptors, and they identified what is now called as TRP1, transient receptor potential V1, a capsaicin sensitive pain receptor. This was their most important discovery. And subsequently, they also discovered that this pain receptor is also sensitive to changes in temperature. And this really kind of added a lot of excitement into the field of research in sensations in general and pain in particular. And Ardem Pataputian actually picked up where David Julius's team left, or rather were involved, and he actually extended the search of TRP receptors which are sensitive to temperature. He looked for other TRP receptors which are sensitive to temperature, and it so happened that David Julius and Pataputian's team almost simultaneously but independently discovered a related receptor called as TRPM8, which is actually sensitive to cold, whereas TRPV1 is sensitive to heat. They found a related receptor TRPM8, which is actually sensitive to cold. So they kind of looked at the two spectrums of temperature sensitivity from hot to cold, and the two groups almost simultaneously, independently, came up with discoveries. Ardem then moved on to search for touch-sensitive receptors, and his team is credited with the discovery of and description of piezo-1 and piezo-2 touch-sensitive receptors, which have been now found to have a variety of mechanosensory functions. So there is this interesting link between their two works, and they have worked together and they have collaborated also, and therefore they were awarded this Nobel Prize together. They're relatively young winners of Nobel Prize compared to 20-30 years ago. We are seeing often more younger scientists winning the Nobel Prize, and that is very encouraging for scientists all over the world. Their work in general is related to the area of sensory physiology. They address the question as to how we sense the world around us. So there are various types of sensations: vision, hearing, touch, pain, position and movement sense, what we physiologists call as proprioception, our ability to be aware of the position of our body parts and whether we're moving or not, in what direction we're moving. So this is proprioception. Also taste and smell. These sensations we are more familiar with because we are aware of them. There are also internal sensations which are generated from within the body, organs and muscles and joints. They are often related to the stretch in the internal organs. They are sensitive to length and size changes and also pressure changes, and also importantly to changes in chemical environment. So for example, changes in pH, changes in oxygen levels, changes in carbon dioxide levels, etc., etc. So these internal sensations we may or may not be consciously aware, but they are equally important in maintaining homeostasis and therefore in maintaining life. So this is the sensory world that that these scientists have studied. If you just for a moment focus on what you're seeing, what you're hearing, the touch that your back is making on the chair, maybe that nagging pain in the ankle because you had that sprain last week, the fact that you're aware of movement, if you're tapping your legs, you're aware of the movement. There may be a smell that is coming from the next door. All these things are such vivid sensations. We have a unitary perception of these sensations, and they are very much part of our consciousness. If there is a problem with any of these, our conscious experience is very much affected. It can be very distressing, and more importantly, it can lead to disease, injury, and maybe even death. So that is the importance of the sensory systems. We have a fairly good understanding of how the sensory system works, thanks to about 300 to 400 years of modern scientific research. To summarize it in one, maybe in a minute, the peripheral nerve fibers end on the body surface and within organs, and these sensory nerve endings have what we call as receptors, which can detect different types of stimuli, which could be mechanical, chemical, light, auditory stimuli, etc., etc. And These receptors detect changes in the outside environment, and they result in changes in membrane potentials in the nerve endings. So these membrane potential changes can be of different types. They can be graded potential changes, or there can be action potentials. So these typical potential changes are the way in which the information about the outside world is encoded. So detection and encoding happens thanks to receptors in the nerve endings. So this encoded information in the form of a pattern of potential changes, in the form of a pattern of electrical changes in the nerve fibers, is transmitted over relatively long distances in the form of action potentials, and it can reach the central nervous system, and it can be transmitted through the central nervous system to different parts of the brain. So you have detection, encoding, and transmission of information. This encoded information which is transmitted can reach brain areas, particularly sensory cortex and related cortical areas of the brain, and other subcortical areas in the brain, where processing of this information takes place, decoding of this information takes place, and by through processes which are still largely less understood, we become aware of the sensation. So this is the story of perception. So we have a mechanistic understanding fairly well of the detection, encoding, and transmission. The processing and awareness is still something a bit of a black box, but interesting research continues to happen here. I said we have a relatively good understanding of detection and encoding, and that is thanks to the work of scientists like Julius, David Julius, and Ardit, whom we are exploring further today. So if you look at the example of a mechanical stimulus, it results in membrane potential changes in nerve endings, and then it results in action potentials which can travel along peripheral sensory fibers and then enter the central nervous system. And there you can have transmission from one neuron to another neuron through synaptic transmission mechanisms, which we'll not look into much today. But we need to understand that the basis for all this is the ability of neurons to generate membrane potentials, which can be localized, for example, receptor potentials at the site of stimulus detection, or they can be self-generating all or none responses like action potentials, which can travel long distances and which can in turn lead to graded potentials in their target neurons. And therefore, this permits integration of information and processing of information. So coming to David Julius and his team, David Julius, in one of his interviews, attributes much of his success to persistence. He says, in science, persistence pays off. And his work is really an example for relentlessly pursuing one area of research. And this is a hallmark of many successful scientists. They pick up one area of research and look at it from different angles. They identify one problem, and then they tackle that problem from different perspectives and try to find answers from different perspectives. So persistence is really what David Julius talks about in his experience as a scientist. David Julius was born in 1955 at Brooklyn, New York, a kind of a middle-class neighborhood of New York. He was born to educated working parents who are second-generation immigrants from Eastern Europe. The typical story of Americans, immigrants making it big in the promised land. He had an early interest in science, which he attributes to one of his school teachers, who was also interestingly a basketball coach, but also used, baseball coach, who actually used baseball to teach physics. I believe he used to explain the physics of the trajectory of how a baseball travels in air. And this is what triggered his interest in science. He went on to study as an undergraduate in Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which is a very prestigious institution. There, he developed an interest in molecular biology. He actually worked with yeast cells in a research group and helped in a project unraveling functions of specific proteins in yeasts. He went on to do a PhD in the University of California, Berkeley, where he used molecular genetics and biochemistry techniques to address his research question. And actually, most of his research in later on, which led to the Nobel Prize, is based on molecular genetics and biochemistry. And therefore, we see the importance of doctoral research in successful scientists. He went on to work in Richard Axel's laboratory. Some of you may recognize Richard Axel also as a Nobel laureate, where he actually cloned a serotonin receptor, one of the first serotonin receptors to be cloned. And he used a function-based screening strategy, which he used later on too. And he says his work in Richard Axel's laboratory was very inspiring for him in his later life. He went on to become a faculty at the University of California in San Francisco, where he continues to teach physiology. He's a physiologist there and continues research. His wife is also a professor at the University of California, San Francisco. And he's had a very fulfilling, contented life and very humble person when you listen to him. When Professor Julius began his research as a faculty member at University of California, San Francisco, the questions in sensory physiology was basically, one of the questions was, how exactly is pain sensed in nerve endings? There was enough understanding that nerve fibers play an important role in sensing sensations, including pain, but how exactly is it sensed? So how do pain causing stimuli trigger neuronal signals in sensory nerve fibers? So that was the kind of research problem that they took up. So they began with a few hypotheses. They hypothesized that there are specific putative receptors. The idea of a receptor was still an idea then. It was a concept. Physically, nobody had really shown receptors. So they proposed that there are specific receptors that are responsive to painful stimuli. And they proposed that these receptors are basically modulating the conductivity of membranes, neuronal membranes. They actually proposed that these are ion channels which open or close when they are encountered by specific stimuli. And the opening or closing of ion channels leads to flow of ions in and out of membranes, leading to changes in electrical potential across the membranes, which lead to the formation of neuronal signals. So this was the kind of working hypothesis that Julius's group had. And the approach they took that was, since no pain receptors were identified at that point of time, they looked at this interesting molecule capsaicin, which is actually extracted from chilies. And it's common knowledge that if some chilies which are extremely spicy can actually lead to a sensation of pain. And of course, chili powder on even a minimal injury causes extreme pain. So there was a clear connection between capsaicin and pain. So they tried to use capsaicin as a tool to understand pain physiology. How does capsaicin cause pain? Does capsaicin cause pain by acting on pain receptors on sensory nerve endings? So can we identify receptors which are sensitive, cells and receptors which are sensitive to capsaicin? Now, by then, the idea of receptors was well established, though they were not physically identified. And one common thing about receptors was that receptors allowed movement of calcium into cells which had these receptors. So increase in calcium was a kind of an indicator for receptors actions, opening of receptors. So they had this tool, they had this kind of a finding that calcium entry into cells can be used as a marker for activation of receptors. So their entire research focus was on identifying receptors for capsaicin using calcium influx as a marker. So what they did was they decided to create a pool of DNA segments which could possibly code capsaicin receptors, and then actually individually look at these DNA segments by putting these DNA segments into a non-responding cell. Take a cell which normally does not respond has no response to capsaicin at all, add DNA segments to it, which are possibly from genes encoding proteins for receptors for capsaicin. And if this DNA translates into a protein within this non-responding cell and converts this non-responding cell into a responsive cell, then the DNA segment can be thought of as a homologous to a gene which codes for a receptor for capsaicin. So this was the approach. Add DNA into non-responding cells, see if you can transform them into responsive cells. If you can do that, then that particular DNA is part of a gene that codes a receptor for capsaicin. And because capsaicin is known to cause pain, that would be a receptor for that would be a pain receptor. So this was the idea that they worked with, and this seminal paper which appeared in Nature in 1997, the capsaicin receptor, heat activated ion channel in the pain pathway. Michael Katerina is one of the first students of David Julius, who worked for about 5-6 years in his lab, and it is primarily his work which brought about this big breakthrough in the leading to the discovery of the first pain receptor that physiologists were able to actually identify and isolate. So step one was identifying a putative gene for a capsaicin receptor. So what they did was they isolated mRNA from dorsal root ganglion cells of mice. Dorsal root ganglions are the location for the sensory neurons in all of us, in all mammals. And if you take dorsal root ganglions, which are close to the spinal cord, and if you grind them up and extract the mRNA, you are very likely to find mRNA which is destined to encode various types of proteins, and surely some of those proteins will be receptors for various types of sensations, including pain. So take DRG cells and isolate mRNA from them. So once you have this mRNA forms the template for DNA. You know, RNA and DNA are complementary. So you can actually synthesize short stretches of DNA using the mRNA template, which will be homologous to this mRNA. So you end up with a whole bunch of short DNA segments, each one of which could be representing a gene, each of which could be the precursor or the blueprint for a receptor molecule. Of course, we don't know. Some of them could be touch receptors, some of them could be pain receptors, some of them could not be may not be receptors at all. So you have a bunch of DNA segments which could putatively represent genes of receptors. Now, this bunch of DNA segments, you take them and you put them into a vector. A vector is a short viral DNA or RNA segment into which you can insert these DNA segments, and the viral, the viral particle intrinsically is capable of infecting cells, and it enters cells. And when it enters cells, these DNA segments of interest can get incorporated into the cell's genetic machinery, and this DNA segment can actually become expressed into a protein. So you're infecting, you're introducing your DNA segments of interest into a host cell, and if that host cell expresses that protein, then you've transformed that cell into a cell which actually makes these proteins. So imagine if one of these DNA segments is a receptor for pain or receptor for capsaicin, and if the infected cells start making these capsaicin receptors, then this cell now becomes sensitive to capsaicin, right? So this was the entire innovation that Julius's team came up with. Mind you, none of this was completely novel in the sense that people knew that mRNA is present in DRG, people knew how to make cDNA libraries, scientists knew how to infect cells and transform them. But taking all these existing ideas and coming up with an innovative way of innovative method of method to identify a capsaicin receptor is what Julius's team did, and they actually successfully did this. They took up cell line, which is actually kidney cells called as HECA293 cells, and they infected them with these DNA segments, and they had to do hundreds of experiments because these DNA segments were non-specific. Some of them may be coding for our capsaicin receptors. Many of them don't code for capsaicin receptors. The only way of finding out was infect or transfect, transform, and then add capsaicin to the cell cultures, and then look for calcium entry. You can see calcium entry because they have dyes which you add to these petri dishes, and if you look under a fluorescent microscope, if calcium enters into the cells, then these glow under the fluorescent microscope. So when you add capsaicin, if the cells glow, that means these cells have become transfected with the DNA for a capsaicin receptor. So they had to go through hundreds and hundreds of cell cultures, almost all of them negative. One or a few of them happen to show this calcium glow, and then bingo. Then you take them, you further isolate them, do serial experimentation, and finally you isolate one cDNA segment which specifically converts cells into capsaicin sensitive cells. So once you identify that, then of course you can use the well-known genetic knowledge to work out the sequence of amino acids and to work out the structure of that particular receptor. So this was the amazingly innovative and painstaking work that Julius's team did. And you can see here the left bottom right side, the right side bottom petri dish is the one which showed the calcium glow. All the others did not have this calcium glow. So the left side one is without capsaicin, the right panel is with capsaicin. So only one series of cell cultures which were transfected with one particular DNA segment showed this calcium glow, which means that these cells were the ones which were transfected with the putative gene for the capsaicin receptor. So once this was discovered, they named it as TRP1 because it resulted in a transient receptor potential, TRPV1 receptor. So this was the first capsaicin receptor which was discovered. And then in the next step, they had to confirm whether this receptor actually led to membrane potential changes and whether it was linked to the pain that one feels with capsaicin. So they took up the next phase of experimentation in which they use a technique called as patch clamp technique. Very interesting technique. You have a very fine glass pipette, very, very tiny tip, invisible to the naked eye, just a micrometer or a couple across. You insert this, you bring this micropipette close to a cell and apply a little bit of suction, which leads to a seal being formed with between this pipette and the cell membrane, and therefore you can actually record electrical current flow from within the cell using these micropipettes. And using electronic instrumentation, you can measure the current flow. And what you can do is you can add things like capsaicin or other pharmacological agents to this cell in the petri dish. And when you add this, if it opens such ion channel, it leads to movement of current, and that current can be measured. And if you can measure a current in response to addition of capsaicin, you're showing that yes, capsaicin has acted on the receptors in this cell and it has opened channels, which has led to current generation, which we are measuring in the patch clamp pipette. And that was how they actually showed these graphs are the records of current when capsaicin is added. So you can see that there is a very clear transient change in the membrane potential, a current flow when capsaicin is added to the cells which express capsaicin receptors. You don't see this current in cells which do not express capsaicin receptors, and that is how they demonstrated unambiguously that these capsaicin receptors are ion channels which lead to membrane potential changes, and therefore these are responsible for encoding these sensations. And very interestingly, they isolated active ingredients from different types of chilies, the regular chili peppers, what we call as capsicum in India, or other chilies, for example, the Thai green chili, something similar to what we have here in India, and other types of chilies. and they found that the amount of current flow varied between active ingredients from different chilies, and in fact it was related to the spiciness of the chilies. So the more spicy chilies had different types of higher current flow compared to the less spicy chilies, and this was very kind of a affirming kind of very interesting finding, which is must have been a very, very exhilarating kind of experience for the researchers involved in this kind of research. So this is how they went on with this research. And there was a bonus finding. As often happens in science, they were not really looking for this, but they almost accidentally discovered that they found that if the temperature of the cells, the fluid that surrounds the cells, if the temperature was higher, lesser amounts of capsaicin resulted in activation. Whereas if the temperature was lower, they required more capsaicin to activate these cells, these receptors. So these receptors were not only sensitive to capsaicin, but they were also sensitive to temperature. And I know this was another big moment where these receptors were not single mode receptors. They were sensitive not only to capsaicin, but they also were temperature sensitive. And when you look back at it, when we eat spicy stuff, you actually sense a feel of it. We in fact describe chilies as hot, right? So the sensation of heat and pain are very much interlinked. So when heat is extreme, it leads to pain. So fundamentally, the same receptors are encoding temperature and ultimately encoding pain. So very something that we can really relate to in real life, in everyday life, especially we Indians who love spicy food can really relate to this. So the capsaicin receptors are also sensitive to heat. So this is the same, the HECA293 cells, which have been transfected with TPRVR1 DNA. And in the last panel, we can see capsaicin was not added, but rather the temperature of that petri dish was increased, and you can see calcium entry, which indicates that these cells are, these receptors are activated just by heat, even in the absence of capsaicin. And if you add both capsaicin and increase the temperature, the response was more. So Julius' team went on to discover more similar channels, related channels to TRPV1, TRPV1, TRPV2, V3, etc. And also they worked out the structure of these channels using different techniques. One of the techniques they used was X-ray crystallography, which uses X-ray beams to generate high resolution images of the protein structure of these channels. Another more recent technique they've used is cryo-electron microscopy. You freeze cell membranes expressing these receptors, suddenly freeze them, deep freeze them, and then you use high resolution electron microscopy to bombard electrons with them and generate images. And you can really visualize these receptors, and of course the amino acid sequences for some of these have been worked out. And like all ion channels, they have domains which span the membrane. That means they thread in and out of the membrane, and they basically form units which are arranged in a cylindrical shape, in a barrel shape, with the channel pore in the middle. So this is a cryoprecipitated electron microscopy image, where you can actually see this 1, 2, 3, 4 units forming a pore in the middle. If you see panel C, and you can see in the presence of capsaicin, for example, the pore is open, and in the absence of capsaicin, the pore can be closed. So you can, literally you can see the channels using these kind of techniques. Some of us may not realize the challenge in this. I just want to point out here, a grain of rice, which you can place on your fingertip, is about 500 times bigger than a typical cell. So your typical cell, single cell, is 500 times smaller than a grain of rice. And one receptor channel is 100,000 times smaller. So that is the scale that we are talking about. And, we can actually visualize these things now, see these things. This doesn't stop to amaze me. When you think about this, the extent to which science has advanced, it really is amazing. So what is the importance of this discovery of this polymodal nociceptors, pain receptors? Every time we have an injury or inflammation because of, say, arthritis or insect bite, a scorpion sting, what Dr. Bawaskar was saying earlier, we have this acute pain, and we also have this chronic pain, and we have this pain which is, we become very sensitive. Even a mild touch can lead to pain. My son fell down yesterday at home, and he fell on his knee. So this morning I just touched his knee and he almost screamed. So this is hypersensitivity. So how does this happen? So when there is injury, there is dilation of blood vessels, and lot of chemicals are released. Chemicals like histamine, bradykinin, serotonin, prostaglandins, even metabolites of ATP, triphosphates, etc. So all of these actually sensitize nerve endings. And capsaicin also acts on the same receptors or similar receptors which are sensitive to things like histamine, serotonin, etc. And all of these sensitize nerve endings, and therefore we become hypersensitive. So even touch becomes painful. And this also is the reason for the chronicity of pain. You may have a pinprick, you get an injection, even after the needle is removed, the pain persists because that injury leads to release of this kind of pain mediators for a long time. And most of us, fortunately, experience pain for a short time, and as the injury heals, we no longer feel pain. But unfortunately, for some of us, the pain becomes chronic. There are many reasons for this, and therefore, understanding, discovering these receptors which are sensitive to these chemical mediators of pain is extremely useful clinically, because we can find novel ways of managing pain. So in fact, this is called as the inflammatory soup. Whenever there is inflammation, it leads to release of many substances, which is practically like a soup. And the components of this, it's important to understand the components of this inflammatory soup and how these act on nerve endings to cause pain, not only peripherally, but also centrally. So that is the importance of this research. And the first pain receptor, which capsaicin receptor, which Julius identified, led to a flurry of research activity in this field. And Ardem, who's actually younger to Julius, had just started off as a young faculty in the same university. And inspired by Julius's work, he looked at other TRP-related channels, and he looked for other temperature-sensitive channels, and he ended up discovering TRPM8 almost simultaneously with Julius, which interestingly did not respond to increase in temperature, but actually responded to a drop in temperature. So they actually discovered a range of receptors which are sensitive to different levels of temperature. He also moved on to a related field of research. His big question was, how do we sense touch? Something which you take for granted. Touch is a very, very important part of our life, isn't it? Of course, it has got importance because of what we call as discriminative touch. We're able to differentiate a 1 rupee coin from a 2 rupee coin often just by feeling it. We're able to even recognize that the pen that I'm having today is not my usual pen. Just not even looking at it, just by touching it. And touch is also very, there's a very emotional connect with touch. Children who are deprived of touch actually they develop a lot of psychological insecurities. Touch is a very important part of our emotional life. So surprisingly, we didn't know much about touch receptors even as late as 1990s. So Ardem pursued touch physiology in a big way, and he searched for touch-sensitive receptors, and his team discovered the first 2 touch receptors to be identified, piezo1 and piezo2, which are now found to be of extreme importance in many fields of physiology and medicine. Ardem Pataputian is a very charismatic figure, is one of the heroes of science now. In one of his interviews, he said, it's an extreme privilege to be a scientist, and this is something which most scientists say, successful scientists say, they really enjoy their work. He was born in Beirut in 1967, which is the capital city of Lebanon. And many of you will know Beirut has had lots of disturbances, civil disturbances. He faced difficult times during his school years. He says that many of the schools in Beirut were shutting down. Not many children were actually going to schools. In fact, at one stage in high school, there were only 5 students in his class. So this was the kind of difficulties he faced as a child in Beirut. His parents were Armenian. They were immigrants into Lebanon, and they had their own set of problems. But they were also hardworking. It was a hardworking family who valued education and made sure that Ardem continued his education. In fact, when he was a teenager, when he was just started college, he started going to college in Beirut. He was in fact kidnapped and held hostage by a group of terrorists for a brief time. And fortunately for him, he got away without any major issues. And that kind of encouraged him to to leave Beirut, to leave Lebanon, and he moved to the US. He took up an undergraduate program in UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles, where he developed an interest in molecular biology, and he had the first taste of laboratory life, life of a scientist, and he really enjoyed it. He went on to do a PhD in California Institute of Technology, Caltech, which is again a very well-known institution. He worked in developmental biology. He did a postdoc at the University of California, San Francisco, the same place where David Julius and his team are working. He worked in the developmental biology of sensory neurons, and he went on to develop his own lab at the Scripps Research Institute, which is in the same campus as UCSF. And like I said, he co-discovered TRPM8, which is sensitive to lower temperatures compared to the capsaicin receptor. And this was his first major independent research success, which led on to other research projects. So his major interest turned out to be the hunt for a touch receptor. So his team came up with another idea. So what they did was they identified cell lines, cells which are sensitive to mechanical stimuli. So imagine growing these cell lines in petri dishes, using equipment with which you can push the surface of the cell and therefore deliver mechanical stimuli, and then simultaneously use the patch clamp technique to measure electrical changes. So you give a mechanical stimulus, and since this is a touch sensitive cell, you can see an electrical response. So what they did was they tried to sequentially, one by one, use interfering mRNA to silence the expression of specific genes. So you take candidate gene 1, introduce interfering mRNA, and therefore silence that gene can no longer be expressed, and then you deliver the mechanical stimulus and see if you can measure a response. So if you measure a response, then it means that the gene that you silenced could not is not related to touch sensation, because if that gene was related to touch sensation, if you silenced it, the cell should no longer be touch sensitive. But if it is not silenced, if it is touch sensitive, then that gene is not related. However, if the gene that you silence is related to touch sensation, then you should fail to measure a response. So this was the approach that they took. Imagine you have to grow a cell culture, set up this experiment, then introduce the gene silencer, wait for the gene silencing to happen, then measure responses of multiple cells and confirm whether touch responsiveness is still there or not. If the touch responsiveness is there, that means this gene is not of interest. You move on to the next experiment, where you start from growing cells, setting up the experiment, introducing gene silencer, waiting for it to silence the gene, and then measure the responses. Each cycle takes 3 to 4 days. And they started doing these experiments. First gene, not related to touch. Second gene, not related to touch. third gene not related, fourth gene not related. So it went on and on and on. And the 72nd gene they tested turned out to be actually related to touch sensation. So you can imagine the hard work here. So the first 71, you could measure responses. The 72nd, you could not measure electrical response, which meant that that particular gene possibly was related to touch sensations. So this is the amount of hard work. So you can see on the right side, panel B, all the 71, the first 71 actually showed responses. The 72nd showed no response, the red one here. This showed no response. So that was the putative gene for a touch sensitive receptor. And when they found it, they labeled it as piezo1. Piezo is Latin for touch. So piezo1. So that is how they discovered this receptor, and they proposed that when there is a mechanical force, the piezo1 receptor opens, allowing ion movement, and therefore electrical potential changes. When there is no mechanical force, the piezo1 receptor is closed, and therefore no ion movement, no electrical changes, and therefore no signaling. They went on to discover a related channel called as piezo2, which in fact was found to be more related to touch. And this was a big series of discoveries. So that is the story of Pataputian's research. So what is the impact of Pataputian's team went on to isolate these receptors, worked out their structures, used crystallography and electron microscopy to work out the structures, just like Julius did. So I'm just skipping over all that. So what is the impact of the research of Julius, David Julius and Pataputian? Their research really brought into focus the importance of sensory physiology. And this is of relevance to millions of people who suffer from pain and related syndromes, and therefore it is of extreme clinical significance. It opens up the possibility of developing novel approaches to pain management and sensory disorders. In fact, we are now aware of a series of congenital disorders called as TPR channelopathies. Children born with abnormal TPR receptors actually have abnormal sensations. They have lack of touch sensitivity. They have lack of pain sensitivity. They have proprioceptive problems. The problem with not sensing pain is a very acute problem, because when you don't sense pain, you don't realize you're injuring yourself. So people with pain, lack of pain sensitivity, actually develop frequent injuries. They in fact are prone to developing injuries, and even can lead to amputation of limbs and sometimes fatal injuries. So lack of pain is a very important defensive mechanism, and lack of pain is a big challenge. We also now know that there are mutations of piezo channels which profoundly impact the sense of touch, vibration, and proprioception. And interestingly, there is also an association with falciparum malaria and piezo2 receptors. Piezo2 receptors are expressed by RBCs also. They are involved in the regulation of RBC size. And interestingly, having a particular mutation of a piezo receptor seems to give protection against falciparum malaria. So in fact, populations in Africa who carry this often carry this mutation, possibly because evolutionarily they are protected from malaria. So it has opened up a big area of research, and it has a big clinical impact. After having described the Nobel laureates and the Nobel winning research of 2021, I just want to wind up pointing out some things which I feel are very important. Science progresses incrementally. Every new discovery is made standing on the shoulders of previous researchers. Every research idea comes from previous research. Every finding is inspired and is triggered by other researchers. So research does not happen in isolation. The Nobel Prize, which was awarded to David Julius and Ardhan Pataputian, is a very good example of how their research actually is the culmination, or is based on the efforts of hundreds of previous researchers. I'll give you a few examples specifically. The Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 1944 was shared by Erlanger and Gasser, well-known physiologists who in the 1930s and 40s very painstakingly showed that the dorsal root ganglion cells are the peripheral sensory fibers, and they in fact showed that there are different types of peripheral sensory nerve fibers which vary in their diameter. Even today, we teach our students about the Erlanger-Gasser classification of nerve fibers, and they showed that different types of fibers of different diameters are sensitive to different types of sensations, some to touch, some to pain, some to pressure, etc. And they showed that these nerve fibers, are distributed differently on the surface of the body. Very painstaking research with lots of personal sacrifice using very rudimentary techniques. This is really the one of the early breakthroughs in sensory physiology, and this discovery of pain nerve sensory nerve fibers is what ultimately led to the idea of receptors, and then led to the discovery of receptors by Julius and Pataputian. So these are two giants on the shoulders of whom later researchers have stood. And in 1963, the Nobel Prize for Physiology and Medicine was shared by three scientists, Eccles, Hodgkin, and Huxley. All of these scientists were involved in characterizing important these three researchers were awarded the Nobel Prize for discoveries concerning I'm sorry. Eccles, Hodgkin, and Huxley received the prize for the discoveries concerning ionic mechanism involved in the central portions of nerve cells. So Hodgkin and Huxley in particular, very interesting scientists. Their work actually started around the Second World War, end of the Second World War. During the war, they actually worked for the army, for the British Army. Huxley was a scientist who contributed to the development of radar. So these were actually physicists. They were actually engineers who then moved on to the field of biology and who used their technology background, their electrical engineering background to develop new techniques to measure, membrane potential changes. And they developed one of the most fascinating biophysical models, one of the most fascinating computational models for how action potentials are developed. They are the fathers of computational neurobiology, and they came from outside of biology, and they contributed to biology. Later on, Neher and Sackman, who won the Nobel Prize in 1991 for their discoveries concerning the function of single ion channels. Neher and Sackman actually developed the patch clamp technique, which we saw both Julius and Pataputian use. They came up with this great innovation of using fine glass micropipettes and measuring current channels across single cells, and even measuring currents across single channels. So again, they came from a biophysicist background, physics background, and they contributed to biology. Later on, in 2003, I'm always inspired by Roderick Mackinnon. Roderick Mackinnon began his life as a biochemist, as a chemist. He then went on to become a doctor. He studied in Harvard Medical School. He trained in Beth Israel Medical School, very, very prestigious medical schools, and he was a practicing physician. At the age of 30, he felt that he wanted to actually do basic science research, not clinical medicine, but basic science research. The kind of thing that Dr. Bawaskar has wonderfully managed to do, both clinical research and basic biomedical research. But Rod Mackinnon wanted to get into the depths of biomedical research. And you know what he did? He gave up his career as a doctor. He went back into physiology research, became a faculty of physiology in a university, and later on, he started understanding the electrophysiology of ion channels, and he specifically wanted to understand the structure of ion channels. So he actually gave up a successful career as an electrophysiologist, and he went back to school, trained himself in structural biophysics. He learned a nascent field of research then, X-ray crystallography. He set up an X-ray crystallograph lab, and he pioneered the imaging of single receptors. He imaged one of the first, I think, a potassium channel receptor, and that was a major breakthrough in structural biology. Like I said, seeing is believing. His group was one of the first to actually give us images of single channels and really kind of, brought a new dimension into physiology and molecular biology. So these are the giants on whose shoulders Julius and Pataputian's teams stood, and took their research one step ahead and tied it all together to give us insights into how we sense touch, how we sense pain, how we sense temperature, and how all these are tied together, and how all these affect millions of people because of the relationship with medicine. So that is what I wanted to point out, that science grows in increments, and scientists work where previous scientists have left off. Science is hard work. When you look at what Julius did, Julius and his team did with hundreds of studies of cell culture, looking for calcium responsiveness, and then what Pataputian did, hundreds of, they had to go through 71 failed experiments to finally reach that successful experiment and find a gene that is responsible for a touch receptor. So it is hard work. It requires passion, dedication, and integrity. Pataputian's team, when they were doing the first 71 experiments, may have been tempted to actually, say, give up, saying that, no, this doesn't work. Or they may have been tempted to actually say that, look, there's a small current here, so this actually may be a touch receptor, and they might have been led on the wrong pathway. So it is hard work, it is dedication, and it is integrity, being true to oneself, not getting, not giving into temptations, and looking for honestly right answers. I think this is very wonderfully shown in these scientists' work. We also see there are no boundaries in science, especially when you see Hodgkin, Huxley, Neher, etc., how they came from very different fields. And even if you look at Mackinnon, how he moved from chemist to medicine, and then on to physiologist, and then a structural biologist. There are no real boundaries in science. Science is truly multidisciplinary. Science is truly interdisciplinary. And science is as much about ideas as it is about methods. We often get stuck with methodology techniques, but remember what Julius did, the methods were always there. The methods were already there. They used existing methods to address a new question, a new idea. And science raises more questions every time it provides an answer. So you find a receptor, and then it raises questions. What is the structure of these receptors? Once you find a structure, then it raises questions. What agonist can bind to it? What antagonist can bind to it? Then you find an agonist which binds to it. Then how can you modify that agonist? So every answer actually leads to more questions. This is the beauty of science. This is the nature of science. And I want to end with this, what Carl Sagan said, somewhere something incredible is waiting to be known. So however much we discover in science, there is much more that remains to be discovered. Somewhere something incredible is waiting to be known. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It was great as always to listen to you. And next, we have a certificate announcement. Sir, Harsha sir, would you like to take questions now or at the end of the sessions?
Manohar, let him take the question right now. Then
Yes.
the last
So I
question.
request
I'm okay with
participants
anything.
to-
I will be there till the end of the program, so I'm okay with it.
Yes. So I request participants to raise their questions in a quick time, if any.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a question. I just have an observation, Harsha. I mean, it's really amazing, this sense of touch and all. See, I heard that, especially the people can feel what is good touch and bad touch. Maybe this research, next stage is.
That's an interesting observation you make. And I can share with you, there's quite a bit of interesting studies in this. For example, imagine a pianist. A pianist uses his fingers a lot to play the piano, or a violinist who uses his fingers to play the violin. So if you actually image their brain, you find
you come across.
Yeah, can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yeah.
Yes. It's not a question, it is just a.
Yeah, I just want to point out the kind of research that is happening here. So if you look at musicians who use their fingertips a lot, you actually see that the brain, the cortical regions, which are dedicated to processing information from the fingertip region, actually expands. So there is more cortical region dedicated to receiving and processing information from the fingertips in musicians or other professionals who use their fingertips more. So the brain, the nervous system is very, very plastic. It is not fixed in stone. So if we, if we use a particular sensation more, the resources of the brain and the nervous system that is available for that is actually upgraded in a sense. So that is the beauty of the nervous system. It's a very plastic system, and it adapts and it really evolves even within a lifetime to adapt to changing needs.
And there is no difference between the nociceptors, that is pain receptors, which recognize the pain due to the heat as well as pain due to the chemical stimulants or noxious stimulants or pressure.
Yeah, I just want to clarify this. That's a very good question. What we discussed today, what we call as a polymodal nociceptor, is one type of several pain receptors. So there are pain receptors which are more specific. So there are receptors which are sensitive to only one particular substance. There are receptors which are sensitive only to mechanical pain. There are receptors which are sensitive to a combination of mechanical pain and chemical stimuli. So there's a whole bunch of different types of receptors. But the interesting thing is that there are receptors which are sensitive both to mechanical pain as well as chemical pain, as well as temperature or heat-induced pain. So there's a variety of pain receptors. What Julius and his team stumbled upon happened to be a receptor which is sensitive to both pain as well as temperature differences.
So in a way, of course, it is not a, I shouldn't be using the words like limitation. That is the thing what this present Nobel laureates, they search for one particular type of this one. Maybe there is much more, much more beyond that. As your last statement, you quoted much more beyond to found out, isn't it?
Yes. So what Julius did was a very kind of a smart approach. Where do you start? You know there are many receptors, but you can't obviously discover all receptors at one go. So you need to have a starting point. So he used a naturally existing trigger to pain, chili. So they use that as a kind of a leverage, as a tool to dissect out the pain receptors. And once you do that, now of course there's an explosion in the field. That once you find one receptor, you can discover its structure, and because the structure of different receptors is often related, they often have a single gene family encodes multiple receptors. So once you find the structure of one receptor, you can identify similar receptors. You can predict what other undiscovered receptors could look like, or what the amino acid sequences could be like. And therefore, that is how it kind of pried open a whole, box of receptors, and therefore we have an explosion of findings now. But the discovery of the first receptor was very, very difficult, and that is what the credit is due to.
Yeah, it's really amazing. I mean, more you learn about it, you more get awed and wonderstruck with the amount of work people do and understanding of the things.
And
it's a lifelong exercise.
And for me, this is always a humbling experience. I think for me at least, I always personally feel that we should therefore respect science. We should respect scientists. We should respect the process of science.
Yes.
We should not belittle science by the temptations that are there to generate results by hook or crook. I think that's a very, very wrong approach to science. It belittles science.
Thank you, Harsha.
Thank you.
Dr.
Hello.
Hello, Dr. Adika here. Thank you, Dr. Harsha, for an exciting and interesting talk. It was very, very clear, and it is very motivating for all of us. Just a small doubt regarding the capsaicin thing. Is it related or in our day-to-day experience during our winter days, we generally tend to have, or the spicy sensation is less, or I mean to say, we need to we like more spicy food to experience the same kind of spiciness when compared to the summer days, in which during our summer days, if we take a little bit of spicy food, we will experience greater sensation or feeling. Is it related to the temperature thing, what you have been explaining?
Yes, definitely possible. There are theories about this. So because capsaicin triggers both the receptors which are also heat sensitive, it basically alters the threshold of activation of the heat temperature receptors also. Therefore, even smaller amounts of chilies can kind of make us feel warmer in a sense.
Yes.
And therefore, we probably prefer more spicy food during a colder climate, whereas we would want to avoid that kind of spicy food. Interestingly, the TPR M8 channel, which both Julius and Pataputian discovered, which is sensitive to cold, the natural agonist for it is menthol, which is found in mint leaves.
Yes.
So it leads to, when we eat mint, it leads to a sensation of a kind of a coldness in our mouth, isn't it? So it's the other side of the spectrum. So just like chilies make us feel hot, mint makes us feel cool, possibly because menthol activates the same receptors which are also sensitive, which are activated at lower temperatures, which are sensitive to cooler temperatures. So yeah, that's what I said. We can really relate to this kind of otherwise very kind of dry science, but we can very much relate it to our day-to-day life experiences.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, Dr. Praveen here, sir. It's a great lecture, and we have witnessed two wonderful lectures. One in clinical physiology and another one in normal physiology. Here just one point I want to make, sir. This Julius paper published in 1990s, right? 1990, right?
Yes, one of the seminal papers was 1997, which actually
1997, yeah, in that decade.
Yeah, they started the work in 1990s. In 1997, they reported that the TRP1 receptor is also heat sensitive. So that link happened in 1997.
Yeah, it's actually the methodology which they tried. It's very highly cumbersome. Now we have this docking system, sir. Shastri sir, so docking. So this ligand and receptor interaction. Yes. So we can predict. So in silico, in a way, we can predict, and no need to go for that many RNAs. We can predict that. So this particular ligand So this may be the receptor. So then the workload will come down to, so much extent.
You're right. We can predict that today because we know the structure of some of the receptors, and we know the structure of some of these receptors because Julius and Pataputian did all the hard work to find that first receptor. So that's
No, we have a ligand, sir, here. We have a ligand.
But Praveen, we don't have the receptor, no. Receptor model is not there. No, ligand is there, fine. But you have to have ligand. Other model, that is what they are trying to find out.
Yeah, but we have a membrane proteins, different membrane proteins.
Yes, Dr. Praveen, the membrane protein was discovered by these people. So
no, this is a specific protein they have discovered. So that is how the interaction takes place. But we have a different membrane proteins. They can just suspect again. So the on the shoulder, what you have told us now. So the earlier research, leads to the new research. So then we know that, these are the membrane receptors or the membrane proteins involved in these interactions. We can pick some proteins and then we can, start trying prediction. But that the docking system was not there at that time. So that was not developed maybe, in 1990s.
True. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Hello.
Yes.
Dr. Halahalli, sir.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Sir,
Yes.
Sir, I enjoyed your presentation. I have a question related to the neuropathic pain, what you have presented. So generally, when it comes to the pain, how can we discriminate emotional contribution to the pain as well as a neuropathic pain? Because when a child feels pain, that is purely because of the emotional component. But when age increases, say 75 plus, whatever it is, majority of the time, emotional component plays a role there. So how can we differentiate these, hot receptor, cold receptors, and from this emotional component? Is it possible? What do you think, sir?
So that's a interesting question and observation. Pain is a very unique sensation in that sense. Pain, emotions are a part and parcel of our pain experience. You can have touch or vision or hearing almost independently of. It's almost possible to independently, very in a detached manner, experience, a sight. In a very detached manner, you can, hear things. For example, work is going on behind my building, and I'm hearing all this, hammering, etc. Over time, it doesn't bother me. But pain, every time there's a pain sensation, there's a very strong emotional component to it. Now, that relationship between the physical sense of pain and the emotional component is a very complex one. It is not explained at the level of receptors in the nerve endings. That linkage is because of the relationship between the brain areas that process the physical aspects of pain and the emotional components of pain. The reason for this, the evolutionary reason for this, I think Dr. Unnikrishnan will appreciate this. Pain is primarily a defense mechanism. So pain is a signal of injury. So when there is injury, we have to get as much away from it as possible. Therefore, over eons, our brains have evolved to create a very, very distressing state of mind whenever there is a injurious stimulus. So the distressing state of mind is the emotion of pain. It is that distressing state of mind which makes us pull away our hand or even run away from the place. That is what makes us nauseated. That is what makes our heart race. That is what makes us sweat, and all the things that are associated with pain. Interestingly, there are individuals who have either injury or ischemic damage to a specific part of the brain, who can feel the sense of injury, who can feel the physical aspect of an injury, but do not feel distressed by it. So, specific brain region involvement can lead to a dissociation between the physical aspect of pain and the emotional aspect of pain. And that's a very dysfunctional thing, because they don't bother, it doesn't bother them. So this is a very interesting area of science and research, Dr. Murali. We can
I agree.
talk
Sir,
about.
just to add on that, amputate legs in diabetics, for that matter, though they have that, don't have that leg, they feel the pain someday. That's what they say. So
Yes.
is it true
Phantom,
in
yeah,
that
the
sense?
phantom,
Correct.
the phantom,
Phantom.
phantom
Yeah,
limbs.
yeah. Okay, okay.
Again, it's a very interesting area of. This is related to a principle in physiology, what we call as label line hypothesis. So a sensory nerve fiber, right from the receptor to the peripheral nerve fiber to the central pathway to the brain region which processes that, the entire thing is involved in sensing pain, and whichever part of this pathway you stimulate, what you feel is pain. Whether you stimulate the receptor or the peripheral nerve or the pathway in the spinal cord or the cortex region which is involved in that, whichever region, whichever location you stimulate, what you feel is pain in that particular spot where that receptor is located. So there are many interesting physiological principles here. So even if there is amputation, when the nerve fibers are severed, stimulation of the nerve fibers in the stump of the limb can lead to a sensation of pain, and that pain is projected to the original location of that, ending of the pain nerve fiber. One of our Indian scientists settled abroad, Villeneuve Ramachandran, has done wonderful work in this in this area. Almost every year we expect a Nobel Prize for Ramachandran, but it doesn't happen. But that doesn't take away the contribution of VR to this field of research. He's from a village near Pondicherry, and he visits India almost every year. And is an excellent orator. You should listen to his videos on TED Talks and YouTube. He in fact has come up with a very innovative way of treating phantom limb pain. He uses a simple mirror. Very interesting approach to that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harsha sir, for your patient answering of all the queries.
My pleasure.
Moving ahead, we have a certificate announcement for the Nobel Prize prediction competition, and I request our principal, Professor Shastri, to announce the certificate awardees. Sir, over to you.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, of course, the prediction of the target, but it doesn't take away their the effort of the students to try to find out who will get the the Nobel Prize. Just now, Harsha was mentioning he has been predicting that BR will get a Nobel Prize for last several years, but still, it is an enigma. Having said that, this I'll read out the name of 10 participants who have taken much initiative, interest in that, and sent their nominations. Ms. Prima Lewis, Ms. Parvati Anil Kumar, Mr. Vinit Raj, Ms. Bhumika, Ms. Anisha, Ms. Sherin, and Mr. Akshay, Mr. Stephen James, Mr. Mohammad Razi Mashuk, and Dr. Kala Bahadur. These are the people who had sent their this one, and I do have their certificate with me, and possibly I request all these people to come and collect this certificate from my office. We really appreciate their participation, and in the days to come, as the eminent speakers were suggesting, it can be a regular affair. As our Vice Chancellor was suggesting, it can be a regular affair across the, we have to reach larger number of people in the days to come, which will actually stimulate the thought process among the students rather than from rote reading. These things, at least they have to read something what's happening around, and maybe we can give some incentives sort of things. Anyway, this time's incentive for all these boys and girls is the certificate we are issuing. And in the days to come, I think the university and can take in a bigger way these initiatives. That's all from my side as far as the announcing of the result is concerned. Thank you. Manohar, over to you.
Thank you, sir. So moving on to the end of the program, it's the time to thank one and all gathered on this webinar. And for this, I request our R&D Director, Praveen Kumar Shetty, sir, to deliver vote of thanks.
Praveen sir, you are muted. Praveen sir.
Sorry. Very good afternoon to all the dignitaries, speakers, and participants. It is a great pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks in this webinar on Frontiers in Medicine and the Nobel Legacy 2022. NGSM MIPS and IIC Nitte deemed to be university has organized this webinar to disseminate the work of innovators and understand the path they took and the challenges they faced on their way to success. We have been fortunate to have an eminent persona from the academia and field of medicine. Keynote speaker of today's webinar, Padma Shri, Dr. Himmatrao Bawaskar. I, on behalf of Nitte deemed to be university and my own behalf, extend a very hearty thanks to Padma Shri, Dr. Himmatrao Bawaskar, who has singularly changed the fate of scorpion bite victims in India and whose work has been employed to treat patients all over the world. He is a source of inspiration to all doctors and budding scientists of India. I deeply appreciate you, sir, for the inspiring words and sharing your journey with the audience of today. Thank you, sir. On this occasion, I wish to place a record of my sincere gratitude to our source of inspiration, Professor Dr. Satish Kumar Bhandari, Vice Chancellor, Nitte deemed to be University, for the wonderful presidential remarks and gracing the occasion. On behalf of the organizing committee, I am also very grateful to Professor Dr. Harsha Halahalli, our registrar, Nitte deemed to be University, for his excellent speech on Nobel Prize in Medicine 2021. I extend my sincere and heartfelt thanks to you, sir. I would like to take this opportunity to express my hearty thanks and gratitude to the chairman of organizing committee, Professor C.S. Shastri, Principal, NGSM MIPS, Nitte deemed to be University. Thank you, sir. Convener, Professor M.K. Unnikrishnan, for organizing this webinar. I would like to acknowledge our gratitude to all the staff of the organizing committee. Finally, I take this opportunity to thank all the students, researchers, doctors, teachers, faculties, and other participants, and hope they will instill the words of Shri Himmatrao Bawaskar and Dr. Harsha sir in their lives. I take this opportunity to congratulate all the awardees of Predict the Nobel contest. I wish them a best of luck for the future. Thank you very much for being with us today. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, sir, for your vote of thanks. And now we come to the end of the webinar, and we promise to come up with a much more interesting webinars in future. Thank you all for joining today's webinar. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.